Only a small handful of people are aware of the events in Daggerfall, Morrowind, and Oblivion that prove Talos is a divine. For 99% of the population of Tamriel, they're told he's a divine by people in power. But they don't know of the actual proof, so when groups like the Thalmor come along wanting to ban his worship, there really isn't the kind of proof needed to counter their claims, which leads to opposing views and eventually conflict. But what is the truth really? Who is Talos? Who is Tiber Septim? Who is Ysmir? And who is Arctis? On my video about Ulfric, I had mentioned the nature of Talos being not straightforward, which I felt I needed to expand on, and thus this video. How to understand Talos in simple terms. The Catholic Holy Trinity of the Son, the Father, and the Holy Spirit makes up the concept of God. Now replace those three, except with Hjalti Earlybeard, Zurin Arctis, and Ysmir Wulfharth. Three distinct persons sharing one essence. That, in simple terms, is Talos. It gets more complicated with the Arcturian Heresy into account, with the simplest explanation being that Ysmir Wulfharth is pretending to be Tiber to make politics easier, so that he can act with the full authority of the Emperor on his behalf. Throw in Septim's own propaganda machine that rewrites his own past to make himself appear more glorious, and you get a number of different public images that belong to one man who apparently became a god. Take the enantiomorph into account, and Zurin Arctis, Ysmir Wulfharth, and Tiber Septim all become a part of Talos. Talos is still Tiber Septim, but in his ascension, he absorbed Arctis and Wulfharth in a certain way. The mythic reenactment basically has all three switch roles, until you can't tell them apart anymore. But I think Talos is still just Tiber Septim's soul with merely the imprints of Arctis and Wulfharth. Let's look at this through history, and we'll try to make more sense out of it. The end of Interregnum and the rise of Third Empire. The remnants of the Interregnum's conflicts still raged, with ambitious lords throughout the land, competing for the chance to place themselves on the throne. Among these aspiring leaders, Cullacane, the king of Falkreath, stood out. He had successfully united the contentious Colovian lords, yet securing his northern border presented a formidable challenge. King Cullacane, however, possessed a hidden asset, a young warrior named Hjalti Earlybeard, who swiftly rose through the ranks of Cullacane's army and became his most distinguished general. The Battle of Old Hroldan would serve as Hjalti's proving ground, and his remarkable achievements in the Reach would be immortalized in legend. The initial step in his journey, from being a mere mortal to a ruler and ultimately to godhood, occurred amidst a war in the Western Reach. Hjalti's formidable forces, comprised of Colovian soldiers and Nordic berserkers, relentlessly pressed forward against the Reachmen's defenses. This unrelenting assault forced the Reachmen to fall back to their last significant bastion, Old Hroldan. Within the safety of their palisaded walls, the Witchmen taunted the attackers, who were unaccustomed to such fortifications. In this challenging moment, the soldiers turned to their young and resourceful general, Hjalti Earlybeard, for guidance. Although he was a shrewd tactician, the situation appeared grim. A prolonged siege was unfeasible, as his troops could anticipate no supplies or reinforcements from Falkreath, their king, who was occupied in the south. Thus, the weight of resolving this dilemma fell squarely upon Hjalti's shoulders. One fateful night, Hjalti retired to his tent to contemplate the choices before him. As he delved into deep thought, a violent tempest descended upon the camp. Rain lashed at the surroundings, and lightning tore through the night sky. Amidst this raging storm, a particular cloud formation descended from the heavens and entered Hjalti's tent. This cloud conversed with a voice that resembled rolling thunder, punctuated by sudden cracks and flashes of lightning. Their discussion continued through the night, and as dawn broke, the storm dissipated, leaving only a tempestuous aura within Hjalti's tent. Emerging from this ethereal encounter, with the swirling clouds veiling his head, the general presented an awe-inspiring sight. The warriors parted to make way for him, much like leaves yielding to a powerful gust of wind. They formed a procession behind their enigmatic leader, following him toward the gates of Old Hroldan. The arrows of the Witchmen proved futile against the swirling tempest that enveloped Hjalti. A moment of tense silence hung in the air, as the storm-veiled general came to a stop before the formidable oak gates of the stronghold. Then, with a deafening crack of thunder, he unleashed a shout that reverberated through the heavens. With a war cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth, the army surged into Old Hroldan, and the defenseless Reachmen met their inevitable demise in staggering numbers. The victory was nothing short of resounding, and Hjalti Earlybeard earned himself a new epithet, one that would resonate through the annals of history. He became known as Talos Stormcrown, the Dragon of the North, the Grey Wind, and the Storm of Kine. Word of Hjalti's remarkable exploits spread rapidly throughout the Western lands. Culhwch's political adversaries began to entertain a previously unthinkable notion, forming a coalition to eliminate the most formidable contender for the Ruby Throne. The lesser lords of Calovia and High Rock forged an alliance, leading to a pivotal battle on the Golden Hill of Sancre. This clash was arguably the linchpin in Culhwch's inexorable rise. While the opposing armies clashed on the battlefield, General Hjalti embarked on a daring infiltration of the ancient fortress, systematically dismantling its defenses with his formidable powers. When the Nordic leaders bore witness to Hjalti's commanding voice, they promptly defected to his side, viewing him as a true son of Skyrim and the rightful heir to the realms of men as dictated by their folklore. Hjalti, aware of the power he wielded as the Storm of Kine, captured the remaining Breton leaders who had opposed him, compelling their forces to surrender, and the day belonged to Culhwch. Upon his emergence from the hills of Sancre, Hjalti proudly bore the long-dormant Amulet of Kings around his neck. Subsequently, the Battle of Five Bridges unfolded, where, with sage counsel from his battle mage Zurin Arctis, Hjalti vanquished an army twice the size of his own. In just 2 years since being acclaimed as the Storm Crown, the Grey Wind had propelled Culhwch all the way to the Imperial City. The Nibonese battle mages, who occupied the capital, swiftly surrendered to Culhwch, dreading the wrath of his formidable general. It is at this juncture that the true ruthlessness of Talos Stormcrown comes to the forefront. Where did Talos origin? From the eyes of an average citizen in the world of Tamriel, a figure named Hjalti Earlybeard emerged as a formidable warrior and leader, displaying prowess that defied his years. Yet, one must ponder the veracity of a tale where a young general happens upon the legendary voice, that fabled power, at the precise moment it is required. Some accounts dismissive of the enigma known as Hjalti contend that Talos existed as Talos from the start, plucked from Atmora's icy embrace by the hand of Culhwch. This perspective suggests that Hjalti, or Tiber or Talos, traced his lineage not to the Bretons, but to the proud Nords of the North. Now, the epic saga of Tiber Septim, as meticulously detailed in the inaugural pocket guide to the Empire, paints a portrait of his birthplace in Atmora, a land once shrouded in legend. It was the ancient Elnefae region, it seems, that bore witness to his arrival. In his youth, he is said to have roamed the frigid expanses of Skyrim, imbibing the sagas of the tongues, the wisdom of tribal chieftains, and the art of warfare itself. Yet, as the world turned and destiny beckoned, the Greybeards, sequestered in their mountain sanctuary, sensed an unrest that heralded impending storms. Villages emptied in terror, foreboding the cataclysm to come. Talos, guided by his purpose, embarked on a treacherous journey to the heart of the Greybeards' domain, where tempestuous winds raged and ancient voices were unshackled. When the venerable sages dared to utter his name, it wasn't mere sound, but seismic force that reverberated through the very earth. The tongues of Skyrim, who were deeply connected to the world itself, foretold that he would rule over Tamriel and urged him to look south, where his true destiny awaited. After the tumultuous battle of Old Hroldan, Talos embarked on a daring journey into Cyrodiil, all amidst the backdrop of a colossal storm. Nevertheless, this poetic rendition of events tends to oversimplify and conveniently gloss over crucial junctures in his intricate life narrative. Meanwhile, the lingering specter of Old Hroldan patiently awaits the return of Hjalti, the very warrior he once nurtured and mentored in the distant realm of Orsinium, located within the rugged terrain of High Rock. It is worth noting that narratives chronicling the life and enduring legacy of Talos are often spoiled by the presence of bias. Imperial records, for instance, have crafted an image of him as a prophesied hero, drawing parallels to the likes of Alessia and Riemann. Conversely, we encounter a heretical manuscript, presumably the handiwork of his former imperial battle mage, Zurin Arctis, which paints a significantly darker and more enigmatic portrayal. Vivek's vision in the Elder Scrolls universe with the idea of names. Names actually hold power, metaphysical, magical, or otherwise, and the sharing of names between the three figures Arctis and Hjalti, both being Tiber Septim, Hjalti and Wulfharth both being Ysmir, and Arctis and Wulfharth both being the Underking, might actually be related to their oneness through the enantiomorphic structure. It's getting more complicated, I know, but just hold on, it'll make sense. As for where it is discussed, once again we have Vivek to thank for all these nonsense. Sermon 11 says, from the Sermon 19 of 36 lessons of Vivek, Vivek then saw the moths that would come from the starry heart, bringing with them dust, more horrible than the ash of Red Mountain. He saw the twin head of a ruling king, who had no equivalent, and 8 imperfections rubbed into precious stones, set into a crown that looked like shackles, which he understood to be the twin crowns of the two-headed king, and a river that fed into the mouth of the two-headed king because he contained multitudes. This passage raises questions and reveals a recurring theme. Queen Alessia combined aspects of Shazar, the god of men, and Ariel's, the god of time, to form Akatosh, the two-headed king of Serodiel, known as the Starry Heart. However, this passage also alludes to Talos, a combination of Hjalti and another entity, possibly Zurin Arctis. Vivek foresaw Tiber Septim as a destructive and dominant force in Tamriel, naming him Tiber Septim. Another passage from the Sermon states, Hortator and Sharmat. 1 and 1, 11, and an elegant number. Which of the ones is the more important? Could you ever tell if they switch places? I can, and that is why you will need me. This passage, while not direct, seems to be alluding to the enantiomorph, albeit one between Vivek, Nerevar, and Dagoth-Ur, which I'd personally think of more like a failed enantiomorph, one which, perhaps, Vivek wished to construct in order to hide his betrayal. Sources on Talos' life and legacy, as I stated before, exhibit inherent bias. Imperial texts depict him as a prophesied hero, often for political or ideological reasons. To understand the whole story surrounding Talos, we also need to understand his Nordic aspect, that is, Ysmir Wulfharth. The character known as the Underking plays a significant role in Daggerfall, and he is widely believed to be the remnants of a fusion between Zurin Arctis and Ysmir Wulfharth. Wulfharth is an ancient Nordic spirit, often associated with making a pact with Tiber Septim, granting him the ability to wield the voice. And according to the Arcturian Heresy, as I stated before, a storm cloud descended upon Hjalti's tent before his victory at Old Hroldan. It was the ancient Ash King, Ysmir Wulfharth, behind this event, who began as a mortal, but later transformed into a returning Ashen spirit, carrying out Shor's will. In the 5 Songs of King Wulfharth, it is mentioned that his Thu'um was so powerful that he could not verbally swear into the office, and scribes were used to draw up his oaths. During his mortal life, he restored the traditional Nordic pantheon, dismantling the temples of the 8 divines. In battle, he faced the orcs and banished their chieftain to oblivion. He wielded storm clouds as shields, protecting his armies from destruction. His legacy blurs the lines between myth and reality. When he passed away, legend has it that the flames of his funeral pyre reached Kain's heart. He was reborn from the ashes to challenge the devil of Red Mountain, seeking to reclaim Shor's heart. Yet, Vivek reduced him to dust. He returned from the ashes again to repel an Akaviri invasion. Afterward, his spirit wandered the winds for many years. Remember the time when the Greybeards shook the world with their proclamation of the new Dragonborn in Skyrim? Well, according to the Arcturian Heresy, a similar roaring, a seismic event allegedly awakened the Ash King, Wulfharth. However, the Greybeards vehemently denied this claim, forcibly reducing him to ash once more. They issued a solemn warning to Wulfharth about the color of betrayal, yet he had already departed, riding the winds once more, in search of the Breton youth destined to govern Tamriel. This is the juncture where the initial two facets of Talos converge. Wulfharth, when he materialized in Hjalti's tent as a foreboding cloud, the spirit of the Ash King obscuring his visage. Hjalti, with a triumphant shout, breached the walls of old Hroldan and embraced all the titles once attributed to Wulfharth. Ysmir, the Dragon of the North, the Grey Wind and the Storm of Kine, detailing and inquisiting Cullacaine's assassination. King Cullacane had achieved the extraordinary feat of being on the cusp of becoming an emperor. Yet, that fateful night was spoiled by tragedy, or perhaps it was treachery. Historical accounts would have you believe that Cullacaine's Breton adversaries conspired to orchestrate his downfall. It is widely documented that a Nightblade from the Western Reach clandestinely infiltrated the city, assassinating the would-be emperor on the eve of his coronation. The vengeance exacted was thorough, as the Nightblade not only ended Cullacaine's life, but also set the imperial palace ablaze and silenced General Talos forever by slitting his throat. Only the Storm of Kine endured. The Pocket Guide to the Empire presents a stirring narrative of the aftermath, one that would solidify Talos' heroic ascent to the ultimate title of the Cyrodiilic Emperor. Emerging from the smoldering ruins, he stood with one hand on his wounded neck and the crown of Cullacaine clutched in the other. The legions wept at the sight. His northern magic had preserved him, though the voice that once could rout an army with a roar now whispered its commands. Assuming the names Tiber, Septim, and Ysmir, the Dragon of the North, he seized the red diamond crown of the Cyrodiils, becoming their true emperor. It is a tale of genuine heroism, one capable of unifying the disparate factions within Tamriel's human provinces. Hailing from High Rock as Hjalti Earlybeard endeared him, albeit reluctantly, to the Bretons. His status as Dragonborn, chosen by the Greybeards to wield the voice against adversaries, made him deeply admired by the Nords. By defying death and succeeding Cullacaine, adopting the name Tiber Septim, he seemed destined to rule the Imperials, weary from 4 centuries of turmoil. This marks the genesis of Talos' triality, one man with 3 facets, an enduring motif in the legend of the hero god of mankind. Arctis, the Imperial battle mage, was the one who crowned Tiber Septim in Cullacaine's stead. However, some contend that this narrative appears too flawless. An alternate theory regarding Talos' ascent to the Ruby Throne reveals a darker side to the beloved emperor. If we are to entertain the idea that Shur's form was inaccessible to Hjalti, who relied on his symbolic storm crown to channel the voice through Wulfharth, we can uncover the motive behind the grand assassination conspiracy. King Cullacaine's tragic demise on the eve of his coronation aligned perfectly with the ambitions of Hjalti and Wulfharth. The Greybeards foretold to Talos that he would unite and rule Tamriel. Thanks to a Breton Nightblade assassin, Talos became the heir apparent. But what about Talos surviving the assassination attempt with a slit throat? If he had betrayed Cullacaine, wouldn't he emerge unharmed? Hjalti knew he couldn't always rely on Wulfharth to perform shouts. If people heard the tale of Talos surviving with a slit throat, he would be celebrated as a hero and have an excuse never to use the voice again. Tiber Septim, arguably the most famous of the Dragonborn emperors, is mentioned using the storm voice at Old Hroldan and Sancre, and little else. Unless the Nightblade's sole purpose was to trim Hjalti's early beard, there's no plausible reason for his survival. Perhaps the Nightblade never existed, and Talos attributed his own deception to the kingdoms of High Rock. By faking the wound and wearing bandages, Talos could claim the crown without demonstrating his voice mastery again. Tamriel's conquest by Tiber Septim within the realm of Tamriel, whether spoken in cautious whispers or proclaimed with resounding shouts, the undeniable truth emerges. Talos, who goes by various names, wielded effective governance over his empire. His mission throughout the Tiber Wars was singular: to unite all of Tamriel under a single banner, and to give him credit to some degree, he did realize that goal. Black Marsh was politically absorbed, though it remained a region inherently resistant to control, with the Argonians rejecting foreign dominion. In contrast, Morrowind never officially surrendered. Wulfharth, resolute in avenging his past defeat by by the warrior poet Vivek 2 millennia ago, led a land too formidable to be conquered. Instead, both mighty provinces found common ground through peaceful agreements. The pivotal step in fulfilling Shore's will came when Talos embraced the Armistice, which involved subduing the proud Altmer and instigating an era of human dominance. While Morrowind preserved its customs and religious freedoms, Tiber Septim acquired the Numidium. However, this compromise greatly enraged the Ash King, who sought retribution against the Tribunal for usurping Shore's divinity. That is the divine powers of Heart of Lorkhan. Tiber Septim then ventured across the Abyssine Sea and laid siege to Somerset's capital, Alinor. The precise mechanisms by which the Empire overcame Somerset remain sparsely documented, though there are hints that the Numidium played a pivotal role in its conquest. Revelations from Daggerfall suggest that the Numidium served as Tiber Septim's clandestine weapon in his quest for supreme power. Standing at a towering 100 feet, it functioned as an automaton, resembling a golem or an Atronach. It relied on the Mantella gem as its power source. This leads us to the intriguing story of Hjalti, Talos, or Tiber's ultimate and crafty betrayal, surpassing even his own supposed usurpation of the Cyrodiilic throne in ruthlessness. Kigrenaxid's initial plans for the brass god hinged on a power source of divine magnitude, the Heart of Lorkhan. While Tiber Septim had assembled the Numidium's pieces, he lacked this vital power source, guarded fervently by the Devil of Dagoth. Septim entrusted the task of reconstructing the tower and unraveling ancient secrets to Arctis, the Imperial battle mage. And although Arctis uncovered a trove of hidden knowledge, he worked with incomplete information. According to the Arcturian Heresy, a significant misunderstanding occurred. While the Heart of Lorkhan was meant to empower the Numidium, Arctis mistakenly believed it required Lorkhan's physical body. In the Elder Scrolls lore, certain events carry profound significance. Among them is Convention, the moment when Nirn was created and Lorkhan faced divine punishment. Lorkhan's punishment involved Trinimac forcibly removing his heart, which was subsequently taken by Ariel. When Tiber Septim came into possession of the Numidium, he entrusted Zurin with the task of activating it. Zurin deduced that a Lorkhanic spark could sufficiently emulate the heart and activate the Numidium. Tiber Septim orchestrated an ambush for Ysmir Wulfharth with the intent of capturing his soul. This ambush mirrored the events of Convention, during which Zurin expelled Wulfharth's heart, allowing Tiber to acquire the Lorkhanic spark, known as the Mantella. This event also fulfilled one of the walking ways or mantling associated with Talos. Suddenly, everything fell into place for him. It became clear that he was destined to command the Numidium, sharing a crown with the Ash King, or Ysmir Wulfharth. This was possible due to Wulfharth being an aspect of Lorkhan, a Shedzarene, and thus resulted the grand scheme that brought a divide between Hjalti, Ysmir, and Arctis, which also paradoxically united them into Talos. Tiber Septim harnessed the power of the Mantella to conquer the Somerset Isles, proclaiming himself emperor and reshaping historical narratives to depict himself as a benevolent ruler. The term, heresy, is used because it challenges this official history, presenting alternative accounts, such as Tiber's assassination of Culacan, his pact with Wulfharth, and the true circumstances of Zurin's demise. Given that Daggerfall confirms the Underking's existence was intertwined with the Mantella, it is considered by many as the authentic chronicle of these events. So Talos scam himself. Well, not quite, because he was not yet himself. What do I mean by this? Well, let's get into how the scamming orchestrated to understand this. Tiber Septim, orchestrating an intricate plot to betray his own status as the Storm Crown, called upon the Ash King, thereby validating the long-held belief in the necessity of dismantling the Tribunal. Ysmir Wulfharth possessed a formidable spirit that exceeded the capacities of an ordinary soul gem. However, Zurin Arctis had stumbled upon the ultimate receptacle, an enormous emerald gem named the Mantella. Upon the Ash King's arrival, he fell victim to an ambush by the Imperial Guards. In Arctis's final moments, he unveiled the Mantella, allowing Ysmir Kingmaker's heart to bore through the battle mage's chest. The guards met their end in the ensuing devastation as well, leaving Tiber Septim as the sole survivor. Ingeniously, Arctis and Wulfharth's souls, now intertwined, fueled the Mantella. With Septim as the sole witness, he masterfully fabricated a narrative of treachery and betrayal, falsely accusing his loyal battle mage of conspiring to overthrow him, a plot foiled by the valiant but now deceased guards. Though Ysmir Wulfharth embodied the essence of Lorcan, he was not Lorcan himself. Consequently, the newly empowered Numidium fell short of realizing the dwarves' original intentions. Nonetheless, it proved formidable enough to subdue Somerset, leading to the unification of Tamriel under a single ruler. After this conquest, an enigmatic undead wizard, a decaying king of sky and storms, shattered the Numidium, a narrative that may sound strangely familiar. Subsequently, the Mantella vanished into the depths of the ocean. As documented in the Arcturian Heresy, Tiber Septim declared himself the inaugural emperor of Tamriel, reigning until he amassed unparalleled wealth. The early phases of his rule underwent substantial revisions, resulting in contradictory accounts and lingering mysteries. Questions persist as to why Alcair lays claim to Talos' birthplace when other sources point to Atmora. Also, there is the enigma of Tiber Septim's apparent transformation after his initial conquests and the mystery behind his betrayal of his loyal battle mage. The core of these mysteries, whether it centers on the heart of the battle mage or the heart of Tiber Septim, remains elusive, leaving us with no definitive answers. In the realm of divine judgment, one could argue that Tiber Septim's path to godhood resembled that of Riemann Serodil, his predecessor. This notion implies that Tiber Septim became a cultural deity hero of mankind, much like Riemann. Certain sources, such as the cryptic Mantella revealed letters, narrate a cataclysmic battle involving the Numidium. In this tale, Tiber Septim and the enigmatic imperial battle mages witness their shared heart being cast away from the mortal realm, thrust into the otherworldly expanse known as the Aetherius. However, this narrative raises perplexing questions. Tiber Septim continued to walk the mortal plane, ushering in a new era and reigning for several decades thereafter, and not the Aetherius. Why was he not considered living god then? What I aim to clarify, as I initially mentioned with the Holy Trinity, is an alternative perspective. In this view, Hjalti Earlybeard, also known as Tiber Septim, did not achieve godhood in isolation. Instead, it was the tri-headed entity recognized as Talos who ascended to divinity. This composite being encompassed elements of the Breton Hjalti, the Nord Ysmir, and the Imperial Arctis. Collectively, they merged into the emerging spirit of humanity, filling the void left by Lorcan among the divines. And consequently, the pantheon expanded to 9 with the inclusion of Talos. It is conceivable that the essence of Shor intertwined with that of Ariel when Alessia introduced Akatosh as the principal deity in the pantheon. However, with Talos' ascent, humanity once again found a champion within Tamriel's dominant faith. This factor is a fundamental reason for the strong opposition from the elven races towards Talos. Possessing the wisdom of Akatosh, the heroic leadership of Tiber Septim, and the Lorcanic aspect embodied by Wulfharth, Talos encompassed the attributes needed to shape a deity capable of uniting all the races of men in Tamriel under a single banner. This might explain why depictions of Talos often portray him defeating a serpent with his blade, reminiscent of Lorcan, who is frequently symbolized as a serpent. It appears that Talos assumed Lorcan's role in the celestial order and in the hearts and minds of humanity. But that banner did not come at just conquest. Tiber Septim used the weapon of mass destruction on civilian population, and the aspect of Lorcan, who is an eternal enemy to the elves, has more than one reason to reject Talos' divinity. While it remains possible that Talos was originally a single individual and that Ysmir didn't bestow his iconic storm crown, or that Arctis powered the Numidium independently of the Shazar, the legend of Talos is rife with inconsistencies. Therefore, I propose that the figure known as Talos or Tiber Septim was not a solitary figure but rather a complex persona with multiple facets defying simplistic classification. The enigma of the multifaceted Talos endures as one of the most beguiling enigmas within the Elder Scrolls tapestry. In the end, though, a lot of the lore surrounding the structure, and basically everything that actually clarifies what it is, is held outside the games themselves. But that's how it goes with the Elder Scrolls lore a lot of the time. The Elder Scrolls is a setting of metaphysics where basically anything is possible. So questioning things based on the logic of real life will get you nowhere. At the very least, we know that Arctis and Hjalti were almost definitely Talos. It is not really disputable, unless you have a very bizarre interpretation of how the warp in the West really went, and thus, Arctis's death allowed for the existence of Talos, the deity, when he was not previously present. Wulfharth and the Underking are another can of worms entirely, but that's the Elder Scrolls for you. The more you learn, the more you realize you know nothing. I see heroism not as a choice, but as a scar left by destiny. Some, I suppose, are polished from birth for their purpose, while others are simply the ones left standing when the divine script is read, stumbling into it through divine prophecies. I watch them emerge from the most unlikeliest of circumstances. Whether they are clawing their way from the depths of a dark dungeon or finding their fate staring up from the chopping block, the executioner's hood blurring against the sky. In the grand, scarred tapestry of Tamriel, a land forever bleeding from some existential wound, I've watched as a hero always rises to the occasion and save the day. These remarkable souls, they're the mortals who slay dragons, who bargain with and bind the very Daedric princes that chew on reality, and who have the audacity to challenge living gods. But as I look back over the ashes of these ages, I have to ask myself, who among them truly stands as Tamriel's greatest? Who did I watch climb the most impossible mountain, conquer the most absolute evil, and leave an indelible mark on the people of Tamriel for generations to come? Today, I'm going to settle this in my own way. I'm going to weigh the stories, the triumphs, and the sheer, unadulterated power of the three champions I consider the mightiest from across the continent, and I will determine Tamriel's greatest hero. So, let's get into it. By most estimations, legendary heroes don't just materialize to rescue cats from trees or stop some village nuisance. No, it is believed true heroes are forged in response to genuine, world-ending peril. They emerge when a menacing villain threatens to conquer the world, or when a bored deity decides to treat civilizations like tiny ant hills under a colossal magnifying glass. And in that grand, fantastical fashion Tamriel loves, its heroes are almost always the chosen ones, shackled to a prophecy. While their predictability is understandable, it must also be conceded it's the very thing that adds the necessary drama to their epic tales. Now, for the first contender, we see a hero born from the deepest, most profound betrayal. This champion, it's argued, emerged only when the divine trio, Vivek, Almalexia, and Sothasil, dared to defy the will of Azura. Her fury, as it's often interpreted, was a tempest of ash that unfurled across Morrowind, twisting the once golden-skinned Chimer into the gray-skinned, red-eyed Dummer we know today, a permanent stain reflecting their blasphemy. But this wasn't just a curse. Many believe within that curse lay a promise. It foretold the return of a chosen one, destined to eventually cast down these false deities. The story goes, after the demise of Indoril Nerevar, the tribunal had sworn a sacred oath to Azura, promising they would never meddle with Kagranak's tools or the heart of Lorkhan. Predictably, this oath was swiftly broken. As these mortals climbed to godhood, Azura made her own vow. She would wield her power over dusk and dawn to ensure Nerevar's eventual return and restore what was right. The tribunal, in their arrogance, merely scoffed at her prophecies. They boasted that they themselves would soon achieve godhood, and that even the Khajiit people would forget their old ways of worship. And for millennia, they were right. Even millennia after their apotheosis, the tribunal were revered as gods in Morrowind, with the ancient faiths preserved only by a select few. While the truth of Nerevar's murder remained a secret to most, it seems certain his queen and general held onto a sliver of hope for his return, especially as the echo of Azura's curse lingered and its mark remained visible in the lives of their people every day. The second hero, it seems, faced a much grimmer, more immediate prospect. One pictures them believing they were destined to meet their end in the frigid, unwelcoming confines of an imperial prison cell, haunted by the obnoxious taunts of their fellow inmate. But their fate, as the story goes, took a sharp, unexpected turn when destiny itself, cloaked in a white fur mantle, descended into that prison. This mysterious visitor claimed to have seen this very imprisoned hero in their dreams. This was, of course, none other than Emperor Uriel Septim VII. The timing, it is argued, couldn't have been more significant. The emperor's assassination was imminent. The Septim dynasty appeared to be in its twilight, and the sacred barrier between the mortal realm and oblivion was dangerously thin. Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric prince, was just waiting in the Deadlands with his legions, poised for destruction. In this desperate hour, it is often found incredible that the only hope for all of Tamriel rested in the hands of this humble prisoner, now burdened with the monumental task of recovering the Amulet of Kings and uncovering the secret heir to the imperial throne. This unassuming prisoner would begin a treacherous journey, wading through filth-laden sewers to finally emerge on the shores of Lake Romer. Honestly, it's worth noting that had this hero not submerged themselves beneath the water, many are convinced their stench alone might have been enough to repel Dagon's forces. Nevertheless, with the entire continent's fate hanging by a thread, one imagines all of Tamriel united in prayer, fervently calling upon the divines for deliverance and beseeching them for a savior. The final hero, in popular estimation, was perhaps the most unlikely of them all. While the people of Skyrim went about their lives, blissfully unaware of the impending doom hanging over them, this hero found themselves in a truly dire predicament. One sees them bound, confined to the back of a horse-drawn cart, tangled up in a seemingly inconsequential civil war, completely oblivious to the true draconic threat looming over the realm. As fate would have it, this hero disembarked from the cart upon their arrival in Helgen, and it is firmly believed that if the hero had knelt just a fraction of a moment faster, or if that executioner hadn't refrained from that ill-timed pause to address his own needs, the world might have succumbed to Alduin, the World Eater. This fearsome dragon had returned, and to the Nords, this signified only one thing: the impending end of time. Having been banished millennia ago, flung forward in time by the enigmatic Elder Scroll and the ancient Norderos, Alduin had, it's argued, finally reached the future, poised to fulfill his apocalyptic destiny. To aid in this, Alduin was resurrecting countless dragons buried across the province. These formidable creatures, it is known, could be vanquished, but it took an incredibly rare combination of skill and valor to even confront them. And as for Alduin himself, the first time he was thwarted, it required the combined efforts of 3 legendary heroes, harnessing the power of the Thuam and the knowledge contained within an Elder Scroll. And even that victory, as the lore is understood, was only temporary. Now, back to the first hero. Azura's prophecy, as is recalled, began with vague inscriptions. The identity of the Nerevarine, Nerevar Reborn, was anything but straightforward. This hero could have been of any race, and their gender could vary, making them elusive, unpredictable. The tribunal, demigods themselves, were, it seems, rightfully vigilant and fearful of this Nerevarine. To ignore the significance of Azura's prophecies, even for them, would have been utter folly. The prophecy, as it is understood, foretold that the Nerevarine would be impervious to harm from both disease and the ravages of time. This immunity, crucially, extended to the devastating skin blight emanating from Red Mountain. Furthermore, the prophecy dictated that this champion, also known as the Moon and Star Reborn, must possess the charisma, strength, and leadership skills necessary to unite the Great Houses and the Ashlander tribes. This exceptional hero's journey was, in this view, marked by significant milestones. They navigated Red Mountain's treacherous ash storms and faced hordes of grotesque blight creatures. It could even be said their most remarkable feat was slaying the dreaded Cliff Racers, a task many are convinced no one had accomplished before. But the true significance of the Nerevarines' deeds, in this view, became apparent only in the heart of the Dwemer ruins at Red Mountain. There, the Nerevarine confronted their old companion, Dagoth Ur, engaging in a fierce battle atop a precarious bridge overlooking the undulating lava flows of the volcano. Dagoth Or even offered the Nerevarine the power of a Kulikan, but it's believed he was powerless to thwart the fulfillment of Azura's prophecy. The Nerevarine consumed the corruption of the sixth house, severed the Earth's connection to the heart of Lorkhan, obliterated the second Numidium, and finally vanquished the now mortal Dagoth Ur. As a result, the heart of Lorkhan vanished from the mortal realm, and the tribunal of demigods reverted to mere mortals. As was a tragic end, Almalexia, driven to madness, killed Sothasil, while Vivek's fate, as far as is known, remained shrouded in mystery. In contrast, the champion of Cyrodiil, it must be admitted, skillfully evaded the relentless mythic Dawn assassins, successfully keeping the Amulet of Kings out of their clutches. They then embarked on a quest to locate the secret scepter of Maer, while assisting the Imperials in their valiant, desperate efforts to defend Kvatch from the invading Daedric hordes. It is always found astounding that they would venture into the perilous Oblivion Gate, scarring the Deadlands in search of the Sigil Stone, an arduous task by any measure. But this, it is known, was only the beginning of their incredible journey. The hero of Kvatch infiltrated the mythic Dawn, cunningly stole the Mysterium's Xarxes, and led a daring assault against Dagon's forces in Bruma. They then entered Gyar Alada, where they faced and ultimately defeated Mankar Cameron and later Manamarco, putting an end to his sinister plans and destroying his realm. It was with the champion's invaluable assistance, it is granted, that Martin Septim was able to don the Amulet of Kings, rekindle the dragon fires, and transform into an avatar of Akatosh, thus banishing Mehrunes Dagon back to the Deadlands. With that crisis averted, the champion's work was incredibly far from over, turning their attention to the return of Umaril the Unfeathered, the dreaded Sorcerer King. The champion reclaimed the lost relics of the Divine Crusader and, in this view, continued what Pelinal Whitestrake had initiated. Their journey then took them to the bizarre realm of Sheogorath, the Shivering Isles, where they engaged in a duel against Jiggalag, the Prince of Order, and ultimately assumed the mantle of the Mad God, becoming Sheogorath themselves. By the time their adventures concluded, it is noted the champion of Cyrodiil had amassed an impressive list of titles and accolades: Hero of Kvatch, Savior of Bruma, Divine Crusader, and Lord Sheogorath, Mad God of the Shivering Isles himself, etc. Their celebrity status even earned them that insufferable, adoring fan. These achievements, it has to be said, are all the more impressive when you remember the champion's humble origins. And lastly, in addition to their primary storyline accomplishments and those in the DLCs, the last Dragonborn achieved a great deal as well, it is conceded. This includes being recognized as the Dragonborn by the Greybeards, reforming the blades, learning the powerful shouts required to confront Alduin, capturing and riding a dragon, and journeying to Sovngarde itself to vanquish the World Eater. The last Dragonborn's next challenge, as is recalled, revolved around preventing the vampire threat in the Sea of Ghosts. By eliminating Lord Harkon of the ancient Volkihar clan, they thwarted a sinister plan to use Oriel's bow to eclipse the sun and create a world ruled by vampires. Their adventures also, notably, took them to Hermaeus Mora's realm of Oblivion Apocrypha, where they confronted Miraak, the first ever Dragonborn. It is believed each of these heroes was indispensable in their respective times, but the question of the greatest among them is generally not seen as a clear-cut answer. While their current state may be eccentric, it must be admitted that if one were to simply compare the power levels of these three heroes, the other heroes just cannot contend with someone who outmatched a Daedric prince and ascended to godhood. But in this line of thinking, comparing them just in terms of raw power levels would not be a proper comparison at all. The Nerevarine, it is recalled, faced off against the demigod Almalexia and the immortal guardian of the heart, Dagoth Ur. Dagoth Ur's crowning achievement, as it is seen, was being empowered by the heart of Lorkhan, while the tribunal was growing weaker without it. To be clear, challenging and overturning the tribunal, who had ruled Morrowind for 4 centuries, was no easy feat. Vivek, it is remembered, had held the ghost fence alone, and much of his divine energy was tied up in this endeavor. With Dagoth defeated and the heart gone, the tribunal lost their godhood. We know Vivek's fate remains unknown, and that in a bout of madness, Almalexia murdered Sothasil. So, you could argue the Nerevarine can only truly take credit for slaying Almalexia, who, while a mighty warrior, was but a shadow of her former self without the power of Lorkhan's heart. So, it could be said the Nerevarine ended the tribunal's agelessness and killed two beings who weren't quite the gods they had been. The last Dragonborn, on the other hand, killed a vampire lord, a Dragonborn, and most significantly, Alduin, the firstborn of Akatosh, destined to consume the world. It is admitted, the last Dragonborn certainly possessed the most superior powers among the three heroes. Without Azira's protection and before reaching godhood, it is suspected the champion of Cyrodiil and the Nerevarine would likely have been obliterated by the sheer might of the Tharn. However, it is still argued that the Nerevarines' deeds were more impressive. The reasoning is that while the last Dragonborn did kill Alduin, it was not done without the help of three legendary warriors: Gormlaith Goldenhilt, Hakon One-Eye, and Felder the Old. And as for the champion of Cyrodiil, yes, Umarail the Unfeathered, Manamarco, and Mankar Cameron were formidable foes. But it is insisted that it was Martin Septim, who became an avatar of the dragon god of time and ultimately ended the Oblivion Crisis. Now, when it's between the Nerevarine and last Dragonborn, it is just thought the feats of the Nerevarine are fundamentally more significant in Tamriel, even after the main quest is over. The last Dragonborn's actions in the main quest, as they are seen, begin and end with the dragons. It's possible he brokers a temporary truce in the civil war, but he does not end it. The Nerevarine, on the other hand, ends the tribunal as we know it, and as the Dummer have known it for generations. Think about it, corpus disease had been a problem long before his arrival, and the ghost fence was a fixture of Morrowind for years, and he changes all of that. It is firmly believed that in spite of all the last Dragonborn had done, life at the start of 4th Era, 201, and at the end of it look exactly the same. The Nerevarine, however, changed the religion of the entire province of Morrowind, removed a terminal disease, and, to some extent or another, became a symbol of unity for the Dummer as he became the Hortator for every community on Vardenfell. As of today, it is guessed all three heroes are likely still alive. The fate of the last Dragonborn after returning from Sovngarde remains unrevealed. The champion of Cyrodiil is busy governing the Shivering Isles, and the Nerevarine is somewhere in Akavir. Their stories may not be over, but taking everything into consideration, the analysis is this: the last Dragonborn stopped Alduin, but the common theory, and one that is widely held, is that the dragon god of time only sent a Dragonborn because Alduin had strayed from his purpose. He bowed to his nature, and instead of ending the Kalpa as he was meant to, he sought to dominate. The last Dragonborn also stopped the Volkihar clan in Merak, but in the process, to be honest, was a plaything for a Daedric prince. So, the hero of Kavach, or the champion of Cyrodiil, was instrumental in keeping Mehrunes Dagon from Tamriel, even if it wasn't their sacrifice that necessarily saved Tamriel. That said, it seems certain that without them, Martin would likely be dead. The Amulet of Kings would belong to Mankar Cameron, who would be the Emperor of Paradise after Dagon finished mangling Tamriel as much as he wanted. Historically, things in Tamriel go pretty sideways when people mess with the Amulet of Kings. The Nerevarine, or the Hortator, kept the Akalakhan from being built, removed the tribunal's source of power, and stopped Dagoth And Dagoth it must be stressed, was going to use a Kalakhan to sweep Tamriel with Corpus, turning all living beings into corpus beasts incapable of death, but doomed to live in misery without any free will or free thought. The world would become Dagoth's version of perfection, where he is the only god, which, frankly, it's thought he could have gotten close to with a Kulakhan, and the heart of Lorkhan. It isn't thought any one of these can be compared to the other in a truly meaningful way. These are all extinction-level events for every being in Tamriel and beyond. It's supposed it just depends on what the individual thinks has the most impact, but in this view, without any one of these prisoners, there wouldn't be a world left to save. And true, from a lore perspective, they're all incredibly important, and all of them save Tamriel from certain doom. That said, from a narrative standpoint, it's thought there's some arguing to be had. First of all, the hero of Kvatch is immediately discounted by many, because, in this view, he isn't the main character of the Oblivion main quest. Martin is, and although the hero of Kvatch was very important in allowing Martin to do as he did at the end of the day, so were Delphine and Paarthurnax for the last Dragonborn. But there's one more, which one might be hesitant to put, because Elder Scrolls Online is not personally considered by all to be much of a game, but from a lore perspective, it offers tons of information, and the hero being talked about is the Vestige. If the Vestige were to be included, it's thought she absolutely takes the cake. The Vestige's heroic acts aren't limited to a single corner of Tamriel, and they are also the only protagonist who can become the Emperor. So what does the Vestige do, really? Well, let's see as the lore reads. They fought Molag Bal and the Plainmilled Sheogorath and the Trials of Iavia. The Tried and their plan to reshape Nirn, Nocturnal, and her plot to become omnipotent, which is thought to be separate from what the Tried tried to do. And now Dagon and his Proto-Oblivion Crisis. And that's not to mention Mannimarco's plan to absorb and replace Molag Bal, the Dragon Crisis and elsewhere, Rada Alsaren's Neogrihost with the ability to respawn indefinitely, and the literal collapse of space-time that Josiah almost caused. Plus, as far as can be told, countless not-so-world-endingly plots of mad rulers, liches, sorcerers, necromancers, reachmen, usurpers, racist Altmeri, etc. Honestly, it is believed the Vestige has dealt with more crap than the player characters of all the other games combined. However, personally, as for a favorite hero in Tamriel, the Nerevarines acts as a hero that transformed the world of Tamriel. The lives he changed during his journey, the avenging of Indoril Nerevar to a degree, and, in a weird way, the freeing of the devil from Dagoth, or is just so very much impacting and interesting to many. And that is where the case will be left for this video. With that, a thank you to all for watching. And like always, if anything has been unclear or inaccurate, please feel free to let it be known down in the comments. And may Talos guide you on your quest. Before the first word was etched into the scrolls of man, there was a thirst that knew no name, a silent predator prowling the borders of the soul where the forest meets the void. To truly grasp the horror of Elder Scroll vampires, we must first acknowledge that they are far more than just monsters in a video game. They are a profound sociological reflection of our deepest cultural anxieties. Whether it is the Romanian Strigoi manifesting a fear of premature burial, or the Chinese Jiangxi personifying a terror of the stolen breath, these legends prove that every civilization builds its own nightmares to safeguard its children and police its taboos. However, in the brutal reality of the Elder Scrolls, these are not merely cautionary folktales used to keep people out of the woods. They are a literal, metaphysical plague, a geopolitical middle finger pointed directly at the gods above. To me, the existence of vampires in Tamriel represents the ultimate theological rebellion, a state of being that deliberately breaks the sacred cycle of life and death, turning the soul into a weapon and a prisoner all at once. Instead of going about the general depiction of vampires as to how they came to be first, I'd like to first explore the origins of vampires in real-world folklores and what it means in sociological and anthropological sense. The Romanian Strigoi is one of the original European vampires existing before the English word vampire was coined, which came with Slavic roots. In Romanian tradition, Strigoi are malevolent spirits of wicked individuals who rise from the grave to prey on the living by drinking their blood. They are known to prowl the silent forests at night and transform into owls, not bats. The reasons behind the Strigoi's existence are speculated to include fears of accidental live burials, rabies, and as a cautionary tale, to discourage children from venturing into the woods at night due to threats of wolves and similar dangers. In the 19th century, Scottish folklorist Emily Gerard collected Transylvanian folktales that included stories of proto-vampires like the Strigoi. Her writings inspired Abraham Bram Stoker, a writer who had never been to Eastern Europe, to create the iconic vampire story, Dracula. Stoker's Dracula draws from various Eastern European vampire folklore and introduces a distinct sexual dimension to vampire lore, reflecting the Victorian era's anxieties and taboos regarding sexuality. Interestingly, Dracula himself was intentionally designed to be unattractive, but his actions, such as blood-sucking, are often interpreted as metaphors for sexual assault. In China, the Jiangshi is a creature that seeks life energy. Unlike European or Slavic vampires that feed on blood, Jiangshis consume the breath of the living. The folklore surrounding Jiangshis involves elements of magic, Kwai or life force, improper burials, and malevolence in life. A prominent method for dealing with Jiangshis involves using a Taoist talisman on the creature's forehead. While there might not be academic sources to support this theory, it is suggested that this exorcism method reflects Chinese culture, essentially acting as a symbolic way for the exorcist to command the vampire to leave. The aforementioned information is to highlight the strong connection between the cultural origins of supernatural creatures like vampires and their depictions in fantasy settings, both as a storytelling device and as a cultural reflection. In the Elder Scrolls universe, vampires are real beings, which differs from our world where they are fictional. This reality in the Elder Scrolls challenges the thesis that the vampires are reflections of a culture's fears, as stated before. And there are two important points to consider that makes vampires so interesting as a storytelling device. First, that disregarding the cultural aspect wouldn't be enjoyable, and second, that both thematically appropriate and inappropriate creatures can contribute to engaging and believable storytelling. Vampires in Elder Scrolls are in a sense tortured souls. Yes, they're immortal. And yes, they get to slay their enemies and dominate their underlings in ways mortals could only dream of. But ultimately they are slaves to their thirsts and find little comfort in life, or unlife, perhaps outside of momentarily fulfilling these desires.
Still always hungry. There's no prey down in this hole. Need to hunt more. All this hiding and skulking around. Blood. So hungry all the time now. Need to hunt again soon. Maybe the clans have it right. Hunting's so chancy. Why not keep a few thralls?
Every time they have a moment alone, they're left facing this reality, which is compounded the longer they live, and by each new chaos they unleash on the world. Sooner or later this pain becomes so great that the only way to escape from it is to only become more bloodthirsty in your conquests, which only adds to the problem. They still have personalities, they're still capable of restraint, and they're capable of drawing amusement out of whoever crosses their path, be it righteous warrior or unfortunate cattle, but ultimately their existence is defined by endless thirst and servitude. From Opusculus Lame Bal to Mezzamorte, as brighter grows light, darker becomes shadow. So it passed that the Daedra Molag Bal looked on Arche and thought the Aedra prideful of his dominion over the death of man and Mer, and it was sooth. Bal, whose sphere is the wanton oppression and entrapment of mortal souls, sought to thwart Arche, who knew that not man, nor Mer, nor beast folk of all Nirn could not escape eventual death. The Aedra was doubtless of his sphere, and so Molag Bal set upon Nirn to best death. Tamriel was still young and filled with danger and wondrous magic when Bal walked in the aspect of a man and took a virgin, Lame Bialfag, from the Nedic peoples. Savage and loveless, Bal profaned her body, and her screams became the shrieking winds, which still haunt certain winding fjords of Skyrim. Shedding a lone droplet of blood on her brow, Bal left Nirn, having sown his wrath. Violated and comatose, Lame was found by the nomads and cared for. A fortnight hence, the nomad wordwoman enshrouded Lame in pall, for she had passed into death. In their way, the nomads built a bonfire to immolate the husk. That night, Lame rose from her funeral pyre and set upon the coven, still aflame. She ripped the throats of the women, ate the eyes of the children, and raped their men as cruelly as Bal had ravished her. And so, Lame, who is known to us as Blood Matron, imprecated her foul aspect upon the folk of Tamriel and begat a brood of countless abominations, from which came the vampires, most cunning of the night horrors. And so was the scourge of undeath wrought upon Tamriel, cruelly mocking Arce's rhythm of life and death through all the coming eras of the 8 Aeda, and for all his sadness, Arce knew this could not be undone. Lame Bialfag, to be blunt, is a literal and metaphorical rape allegory. As priestess of Arce, her violation and transformation into the first vampire is a direct insult at Arce, the god of cycle of life and death. As the first vampire, the state of Lame Bialfag is arguably worse than being a zombie in the context of Arce, as unlike zombies, vampires are a walking perversion of life and death at the same time, being the literal limbo of the two states. One particular thing to note, Lame Bal states, "You sought to poison us with your blood, but we survived, and from your poison we grew." Taking that line into account could suggest that Molag Bal didn't intend for her to live or vampires to come into existence for that matter. The beliefs about the origins of vampires vary, and not all vampires are thought to be linked to Molag Bal or Daedric origins. Some stories suggest that vampires can be created through mortal experimentation with magic. In the Iliac Bay region, people believe that the vampires can be created either through magical artifacts or as a result of a wizard's curse. In the Third Era, dumber nationalists held the belief that vampirism originated in the West through necromancy and couldn't be native to Vardenfell. They attributed this to the Tribunal Temple's efforts to suppress vampires and their cultural aversion to necromancers and foreigners, whom they blamed for introducing necromancy to their land. These beliefs may align with common misconceptions about necromancy and vampirism that persist among the public. In the canon, the weirdest vampires that we know of comes from northern Valenwood. They are the Bonsamu, who look like Bosmers, unless shown with candlelight, the Kirilth, who can turn to mists, the Yekif, who are vor enthusiasts, and the Telboth, who prey on children's. Valenwood is a dangerous place. In the lore, Valenwood is a largely uninhabited forests with trees so tall that their canopies shroud the undergrowth in near perpetual gloom and darkness. The dominant inhabitant of Valenwood, the Bosmer, either live in along the coasts or in the great oaks that lurch above its smaller kin. Despite their connection with the trees, the Bosmer themselves are no apex predators, because if they were, why would they even bother? With innovations of civilization such as bows, spears, and of course, portable light, the Bonsamu are seemingly the personification of the primal fear of a dark forest and can be driven back, or at least made vulnerable when held under the scrutiny of a civilized candle. However, candles don't light forever, and sooner or later, the light will snuff itself out and the darkness will return. The Kirilth also thematically tie in with the Hungry Forest theme Valenwood has. Though instead of darkness, it's the mists. The mists, like darkness, not only provide cover for dangerous predators, but they are also omnipresent. Valenwood, after all, is mostly a forest, yet untouched by civilization, and mists are often thick in these places, leading to the impression that one is always watched by something they just can't see. Anyway, in regards to vampiric lore, the Kirilth seems to be a play on the traditional European vampire myth, in that their weakness is running water. The Yekif is not only reminiscent of snakes, but also of the fear of disappearance. Popular depictions of animals hunting people as food are often messy affairs with cloths and blood everywhere. The truth is less dramatic. People tend to disappear outright when they decide that humans are on the menu. But to the topic, the Yekif's feeding habits could be interpreted as a perversion of the Green Pact, where a Bosmer must feast on their kill, though in the Yekif's case, they're just multitaskings. The Telboth is very evocative of changelings with theories of these stories as attempts to explain deformities and neurodivergent children. While these tales speak to the fears and imagination of mortals, the reality of vampirism reveals something far stranger and far more potent than mere folklore. Vampiric blood is far more than a source of hunger. It is a substance of profound power. Even minute quantities are said to strengthen the life force, allowing mortals to cling to existence when all hope seems lost. Legends speak of vampires reviving those at the very brink of death, staving off ailments that would kill ordinary men. Their blood can counter lethal poisons, purify diseased flesh, and even heal afflictions that defy conventional medicine. Take, for instance, the osteochondritic fever, a virulent, magical plague that turns living flesh into coral-like growths, highly contagious and resistant to conventional cures. Many scholars believe it was crafted by the Slode using a blend of necromantic sorcery and thaumaturgy. Attempts to halt its spread only accelerate its progression, yet the infusion of vampiric blood can counteract its effects, halting the coralification and restoring the victim's vitality. The process of becoming a vampire in Tamriel is as much metaphysical as it is corporeal. Mortals we recognize as vampires are mortals infused with a very specific strain of Daedric energy. In the case of pure-blooded vampires, this energy flows directly from the Daedric prince associated with vampiric dominion, such as Molag Bal. Others achieve their unholy state by siphoning power from a fellow vampire, while many are afflicted through a virulent disease that serves as a proxy, bridging Daedric power into the mortal soul. Regardless of its origin, the result is the same, a being attuned to night and shadow, compelled by hunger for blood, weakened by the sun, and marked by an insatiable craving for life essence. Some scholars note that certain vampiric transformations are even alchemically induced, the product of forbidden experiments by mortals dabbling in necromancy or blood magic, although these artificial strains rarely match the potency of natural Daedric-afflicted vampires. Vampirism manifests not only in the body but in the soul, through what might be described as two forms of corruption, external and internal. External corruption occurs when a magical object or entity infuses a mortal with Daedric influence, subtly altering personality, desires, or worldviews. This form of corruption is seductive, but can often be mitigated through ritual, alchemical treatment, and even lifestyle changes. Adjustments as simple as diet, meditation, or exposure to sanctified ground may help restore balance, redirecting the mortal's path away from the shadow. Internal corruption, on the other hand, is far more insidious and dangerous. It represents a long-term, intimate integration of Daedric energy into the heart and soul of a mortal. Daedric princes excel at this form, manipulating the desperate or ambitious through bargains, temptation, and coercion. Mortals corrupted in this way carry a permanent foothold of the Daedra within them. They are often unaware of the subtle erosion of their autonomy until the effects are irreversible. While theoretical purification is possible, the effort demands both extraordinary magical intervention and a profound desire to be freed from the Daedric touch. More often than not, those afflicted embrace the corruption, finding in it a dark empowerment, a voice whispering promises of strength, immortality, or vengeance. These willing participants become the true vampires of legend, their souls intertwined irrevocably with the night. Beyond these metaphysical considerations, vampirism confers a wide array of physical and mystical enhancements. Vampires heal at a remarkable rate, can manipulate shadows and necrotic energies, and often gain access to powers forbidden to mortals. Yet every gift carries a cost: sensitivity to sunlight, a constant craving for blood, and the social alienation of living in darkness. Different strains of vampirism, influenced by geography, Daedric patronage, or alchemical experimentation, result in wildly divergent abilities, appearances, and vulnerabilities. A vampire from Skyrim may differ in form and temperament from one in Cyrodiil or Black Marsh, reflecting the mutable, evolutionary nature of the curse. Vampirism in Tamriel is more than disease or curse. It is a nexus of body, soul, and Daedric influence. It is simultaneously a weapon, a poison, a blessing, and a prison. Those who carry it walk a narrow line between mortal frailty and near-divine power, their lives a testament to the seductive, corrupting, and transformative nature of the Daedric touch. Yet this dark gift does not wear one face alone. Vampirism in Tamriel is far from a uniform curse. Across the provinces, it manifests in numerous strains, each with its own peculiarities and dangers. Much like bloodlines, these strains evolve over time, adapting to local magics, climates, and even cultural practices. The result is a wild diversity of vampiric forms, each requiring its own methods of study, avoidance, or eradication. While a full catalog would be overwhelming, Here are the most significant and infamous strains I could find that are known to scholars and adventurers alike. Firstly, we have Noxophilic Sanguivoria, tracing its origins to Llame-Bealfag. During the Second Era, Noxophilic Sanguivoria is among the rarest strains of vampirism. Unlike common vampires, those afflicted with this strain resist the debilitating effects of sunlight and instead gain strength under the moon's gaze. With every feeding, their power grows, in stark contrast to other vampires who weaken with each act of predation. Perhaps the most striking trait is their ability to shroud themselves in mist, an eerie cloak that allows stealthy movement and lends an air of supernatural mystery. Avoiding full vampirism in this strain is possible through timely intervention. A priest of Arche can purge the disease, and abstaining from the blood ritual, essential for the complete transformation, can prevent the onset. Curiously, the only way to acquire true Noxophilic Sanguivoria is through exsanguination. The victim's blood must be replaced with that of Llame-Bealfag herself, a process that underscores its extreme rarity and mystical nature. Next is porphyric hemophilia, often referred to simply as the vampire's disease. Porphyric hemophilia unfolds with cruel precision. Its incubation period lasts 3 days, during which victims experience declining stamina and a creeping sense of lethargy. On the 3rd night, the transformation is complete. The afflicted becomes a vampire, their body and mind reshaped to serve the night. While the initial infection can be treated if caught early, the vampirism that follows is notoriously difficult to reverse. Porphyric hemophilia shares traits with other strains like Sanguinaire Vampirus and Noxophilic Sanguivoria, including the physical and supernatural alterations that make full vampires dangerous and tragic figures, caught between humanity and the eternal curse. Next is Sanguinaire Vampirus. This is the most widespread and classical form of vampirism, particularly prevalent in Skyrim. Sanguinaire Vampirus follows the familiar 3-day incubation period, after which victims experience heightened thirst for blood and vulnerability to sunlight. While early-stage infections can be cured, those fully transformed face a grim struggle to reclaim their humanity. Despite its prevalence, Sanguinaire Vampirus is considered less exotic than strains like Noxophilic Sanguivoria, yet it remains deadly in the hands of cunning or desperate vampires. Next is Valkihar strain. Originating from Molag Bal himself, the Valkihar strain grants the infamous vampire lord transformation, a form that elevates a vampire's power dramatically.
There is but one gift I can give that is equal in value to the Elder Scroll and my daughter. I offer you my blood. Take it and you will walk as a lion among sheep. Men will tremble at your approach and you will never fear death again. You contracted a disease, perhaps, but you are no true vampire. Accept my gift, and I promise that you will learn the difference. Refuse me, and I will banish you from this castle. I will spare your life this once, but after that, you are prey. Perhaps you still need convincing. Behold the power! This is the power that I offer. Now, make your choice. Be still.
Those afflicted can channel dark magic and immense strength, yet they retain many of the vulnerabilities of traditional Sanguinaire Vampirus, weakness to sunlight, and the constant need to feed. This strain is most closely associated with the Valkihar clan, who are among the most powerful and organized vampire factions in Skyrim. Next is Chaotica Vampirus. First encountered during the events of the Elder Scrolls Online, Greymoor, Chaotica Vampirus represents a modern, experimental evolution of vampirism. Unlike traditional strains, it targets existing vampires, altering their physiology through chaotic creatia harvested from Cold Harbor. The result is the creation of Blood Knights, vampires of unmatched speed, strength, and ferocity. This strain exemplifies the mutability of vampirism and the influence of Daedric forces on mortal bloodlines. Next is Onde strain. Unique to the Somerset Isles, the Onde strain is believed to have originated among Altmer alchemists experimenting with prolonged life. Onde vampires possess subtle but dangerous abilities, a natural talent for stealth, mild resistance to sunlight, and a heightened sensitivity to magical auras. They are often mistaken for skilled mages or sorcerers before their predatory nature is revealed. Next is Vardvark strain. Rare and poorly understood, the Vardvark strain appears primarily in Morrowind. Victims of this strain exhibit grotesque physical mutations, including clawed hands, elongated fangs, and an unnatural pallor, but in return gain extraordinary resilience and regenerative capabilities. This strain is often associated with the Ash vampire cults, who embrace the curse as a gift from their dark gods. Lastly, there is hemomantic vampirism. A recent emergence in Black Marsh and parts of Cerodial, hemomantic vampirism is linked to Argonian necromantic rituals. Unlike other strains, it allows the vampire to manipulate their own blood as a weapon, forming blades or tendrils in combat. Though limited to certain regions and species, it demonstrates how vampirism adapts uniquely to local magical practices. Each of these strains illustrates the diversity of vampiric affliction in Tamriel, from the mist-shrouded Noxophilic Sanguivoria to the brutal Blood Knights of Chaotica Vampiris. Every province offers a different form of horror. Vampirism is not merely a disease, but a living, evolving phenomenon, one that reflects the history, magic, and darkness of Tamriel itself, and, similar to bloodlines and strains, there are countless clans of vampires over different regions of Tamriel. Detailing all of them would take forever and would read like a laundry list. So I am just going to go over some of the most prominent clans briefly that I personally find fascinating. At first I have Montelian clan, led by a daughter of Cold Harbor. This is their claim of superiority against the other clans. It is one of the vampire bloodlines of the Iliac Bay area. Those of the bloodline are gifted with the ability to cure paralysis and the power of teleportation. The bloodline dominates the area around the mouth of the Bielsi River. They are the enemies of the Selenu bloodline. And in number 2 is the Vreseth clan. It's possible that this group could be a remnant of the Crimson Scars, or it might be an entirely new assassins guild. Notably, the Crimson Scars were vampiric assassins who separated from the Dark Brotherhood in 3rd Era 421. The Crimson Scars might make their return in the Elder Scrolls 6. However, resurrecting the Crimson Scars might be challenging, considering their leader eventually came to believe that Sithis did not intend for the Dark Brotherhood to consist solely of vampires, likely because Molag Bal is the creator of vampirism. To make this concept work, one could imagine a scenario where a member of the Crimson Scars disagreed with Greywind's second vision, prompting them to split from the group and depart for Hammerfell with a small faction of like-minded individuals. This splinter faction might choose to follow Molag Bal or refrain from aligning with any specific Daedra or deity, deviating from the traditional Sithis worship of the Dark Brotherhood. At number 3 is the Anthodus clan. In addition to their other advantages, these vampires possess the ability to conceal the outward signs of vampirism, allowing them to seamlessly blend into human society. They have established control over a town or city, where they actively deter vampire hunters by employing their private mercenaries. These mercenaries are tasked with hunting down vampires, but their efforts are carefully directed solely against rival vampire clans and lycanthropes, ensuring the safety of the vampire inhabitants. It's possible that within this group, there exists a faction that desires a cure for vampirism, leading to internal divisions and conflicting goals. The majority of these members covertly live in Hegeth, where they assume the roles of priests and priestesses of Morwa, the Yokudan goddess of fertility. They tend to the local temple and interact with citizens while concealing their true identities. Underneath the Temple of Morwa, there is a concealed tunnel leading to a Dwemer ruin in the western Alikar Desert. Interestingly, these members do not worship or utilize the shrines dedicated to Morwa themselves. Instead, they have mortal associates who assist in maintaining the facade and appearances on their behalf. At number 4 is the Selenu clan. The Selenu are a vampire bloodline found in the Iliac Bay region. Those of the bloodline are resistant to elemental attacks. Heavy Molag Bal worship in this clan, and arch-enemies with the Montelian clan who also worship Molag Bal. The bloodline is named after Selenu, a Nedic tribal elder of the Wyrd from ancient Skyrim who ordered the attempted cremation of Molag Bal, the first vampire. At number 5 is the Kalari clan. It is a vampire bloodline in the Iliac Bay region, known for their unique ability to paralyze their victims. They have a strong presence in Hammerfell. The Kalari bloodline is in opposition to the Anthodus bloodline, considering them as enemies. At number 6 is the House Ravenwatch, based in Rivenspire, is an altruistic vampire group led by Verandis Ravenwatch, a pure-blooded Altmer vampire. They adhere to a code emphasizing honor, vigilance, nobility, and restraint. Their main mission is to use their vampiric powers responsibly to assist others, only feeding on willing servants and avoiding excess or feeding on outlaws. They undergo regular training to control their urge to kill. House Ravenwatch welcomes vampires who follow Verandis's code, conducts historical research, and works to keep other vampire bloodlines and clans in check. Due to their inclusive nature and mentorship, they function more as a clan than a specific bloodline, accepting vampires from various bloodlines who adhere to the Ravenwatch code. At number 7 is the Volkar vampires in the eastern Skyrim. According to lore, dwell beneath frozen lakes, emerging only to feed. They possess the ability to freeze their victims with icy breath and can reach through ice without breaking it. They share similarities with Ceradylic vampires, such as night vision, invisibility, and the power to control mortals. Some Volkihar vampires appear more monstrous, with unique features and have distinct abilities, including reanimating the dead and resistance to sunlight, though it weakens them. They employ deathhounds as guardians. Ancient Volkihar vampires, like those at Castle Volkihar, are pure-blooded and can transform into vampire lords, gaining additional powers such as summoning gargoyles. They often use thralls when feeding and occasionally feed on sleeping mortals. In the Second Era, a subset of the Volkihar clan fed exclusively on animal blood. At number 8 is the Nighthollow clan, who utilized the Void and used said void energy to sustain themselves, as blood gave them no nourishment. They ruled the Reach and were dubbed the Night Lords by the Reach folk. The Dwemer inhabited Blackreach in order to mine Ethereum from its depths. Eventually, the Dwemer would go to war in the Ethereum Wars, which destroyed the underground city-states of the Dwemer in Blackreach. At number 9 is the Scion of Bloodmatron, or Lamai's bloodline, another clan, or sort of vampiric cult, who are the direct lineage of Molag Bal. They are transformed in a ritual called the Rites of Scion. In a ritual, a mortal is introduced to the blood matron by a scion. The mortal is given the title of Initiate, and the scion becomes a blood speaker. The blood speaker prepares symbols related to Archay and Molag Bal, and then guides the initiate through a series of steps, including drinking from basins, learning about Molag Bal's history, and defiling the symbols. Finally, the initiate is willingly drained of all blood by the blood matron, who may revive them with her own blood if she deems them worthy. Vampires are seen as afflicted victims suffering from a disease. Scions, however, are directly blessed by the blood matron, granting them stronger blood, greater power, and enhanced beauty. Scions, who are offspring of the blood matron, refuse to bow to anyone as they are no longer bound by servitude. While they choose to serve, the blood matron wishes for her children to unite and subjugate their enemies, making them subjects instead. In a curse, they condemn Archay for abandoning them in darkness, but they have thrived and grown stronger in that darkness. They now feed on Archay's followers to gain strength to conquer him. They also curse Molag Bal for trying to poison them with his blood, but they have grown from that poison and are now determined to defile and destroy him instead. As the first vampire, Molag Bal can modify existing vampire strains or create new ones, like the blood scion form that she devised and reversed the correlation between power and hunger. She can also seemingly exert control over vampires in her bloodlines. As in, she can restrict their power, erase their memories, prevent them from transferring vampirism, etc. Given the presumption that all these bloodlines endured into the 3rd century of Tamriel's 4th era, one could envision the Montalion and Vrasith bloodlines as still holding prominence within the Warist and Daggerfall kingdoms in High Rock. Simultaneously, Their rival Anthodis and Selenu bloodlines might remain prominent within the Alik'r Desert and the regions surrounding the city of Sentinel and Hammerfell, respectively. Beyond these clans already discussed, other major bloodlines hold significant historical weight. The Cyrodiilic Vampirum Order, sometimes called the Order of the Virtuous Blood by their detractors, perfected the art of assimilation in the Imperial Heartland. Their strain allows for relatively normal appearances, reduced aggression, and predictable feeding cycles, enabling them to blend seamlessly into Imperial society for centuries. Their existence explains why widespread vampire panics did not destabilize the Septim Empire to the degree seen elsewhere. In Morrowind, the Burn, Ande, and Quara bloodlines developed unique adaptations. The Burn favors stealth and agility. The Ande cultivate arcane mastery and sorcery, and the Quara embrace brute physical dominance. Their divergent traits reflect the cultural fragmentation of Vvardenfell itself and suggest that vampirism in Morrowind evolved along competitive rather than cooperative lines. In Black Marsh, accounts of the Wetfang describe a clan that treats vampirism as a pragmatic disease, fed upon strategically, hidden when necessary, and utilized to enhance tribal influence rather than reshape society. Their approach emphasizes that vampirism interacts with culture rather than overriding it. Taking a longer historical view, one can easily imagine many of these clans surviving well into the Fourth Era, with the Iliac Bay continuing to be shaped by the Montalion and Vraseth in the north and the Anthodis and Selenu in the south. Rivenspire, as always, would remain a haven for Ravenwatch influence, while Skyrim would struggle with periodic Valkihar resurgence whenever mortals grew complacent. The most significant shift would not be territorial, but ideological, a future in which Molag Bal's supremacy over vampirism is contested not from the outside by Arche, but from within by Lemme's children who resent both abandonment and subjugation. In such a world, vampirism ceases to be merely a curse and becomes a geopolitical force, fragmented, adaptive, and increasingly unwilling to remain in the shadows. However, all such futures hinge on one question, far more profound than borders or bloodlines: why Arche or any of the Aedra did not help Lemme Bealfag in her greatest time of need. This question lies at the very heart of the Elder Scrolls' interpretation of vampirism. To understand the origins of vampirism, we have to look not just at Lemme's personal tragedy, but also at the cosmic implications of what Molag Bal was actually attempting to do.
When I was a priestess of Arche, Molag Bal ravaged me and left me for dead. A group of nomads tried to purify me with fire, but I awoke, changed.
Poor girl. May these flames purify her spirit.
Elder, what do you believe happened to her?
Her body was mangled, rent apart by a terrible darkness. Its corruption is still on her. I can feel it.
Is it true her wounds healed on their own?
Yes, that is why I insisted we perform this rite at once.
Elder, the girl!
No, we're too late.
No,
Back away!
Molag Bal, father of torment, we curse you! You sought to poison us with your blood! But we survived, and from your poison, we grew! King of corruption, your children are coming! They will defile and destroy you! When I saw what I had done, I called out to my god, Arche! I prayed that he would rid me of Molag Bal's curse, but Arche did not answer. Arche! Answer me! I am your priestess! Answer! Molag Bal said you would not come. He said you turned your light away from me. Arche! Do you hear me? You are false! I reject you! Arche the Forsaker, we curse you! You left us to suffer in darkness! But we survived, and in darkness we grew. Now we feed upon your bones, and will use their stolen secrets to conquer and consume you! submit yourself to me! Children, this is your kin. Life still flows within its blood. Tear it out, drain it, so that it may join us! Now you are one of us. I offer you a gift. The catacombs are filled with the Defiler's cultists. Sneak up behind your prey and feast. Relish your new powers. Embrace my blessing.
LeMay's defilement was not just an act of cruelty, nor merely a violation of mortal flesh. It was a deliberate assault on the foundation of Nirn's metaphysical laws. Archay is the steward of the cycle, the one who oversees the transition between life and death, birth to burial, blood to soil. Molag Bal's corruption of LeMay was designed specifically to break that cycle, to create a state of being that is neither living nor properly dead, a condition that Archay himself did not, and perhaps could not, fully account for. This is where the argument in defense of Archay becomes relevant. Archay may not have been able to intervene because LeMay's corruption fell outside the two domains he governs. What Molag Bal created was a third state, a blasphemous loophole in the cosmic rule set, where a body is denied the release of death, but also denied the sanctity of life. If Archay is the gatekeeper of endings, then vampires are those who refuse to pass through the gate at all. And if that is the case, then LeMay's corruption wasn't merely an affront to Archay. It was a form of jailbreak, the metaphysical equivalent of breaking out of Archay's jurisdiction entirely. Molag Bal, being both pragmatic and sadistic, likely took measures to shield LeMay from divine contact, not only to torment her, but to assert sovereignty over her soul. Many scholars have argued that LeMay's story marks the first recorded instance of Archay's law, the metaphysical principle that denies the undead the right to burial rites, precisely because Archay had no framework for what she had become until after the fact. LeMay's transformation was unprecedented, and because it was unprecedented, it broke the rules before the rules even existed. There is also the narrative dimension of LeMay's despair. Upon becoming the first vampire, she lashed out in grief and fury, committing atrocities against her own tribe. These were not acts of survival, but of spite and contempt. Only after her bloodlust abated did she turn back toward the divine, crying out to Archay for release or forgiveness. But by then, she was no longer the innocent shepherdess she began as. Her plea came not from a dying soul reaching out to the cycle, but from an undead being demanding mercy from beyond it. Archay's silence in that moment can be interpreted in two ways. Either he did not hear her because she was no longer part of his sphere, or he heard her, but could not answer because she was now owned by another. Either interpretation suits the metaphysics of the Elder Scrolls, where gods are bound not by sentiment, but by function. To understand the could not part, we have to examine how the Aedra themselves are situated in the architecture of Nirn. The divines are frequently criticized for their absence or their perceived indifference toward mortal suffering, but this criticism only makes sense if one assumes the Aedra are omnipotent, omnipresent, and omnibenevolent in the real-world theological sense. They are not. The Aedra sacrificed vast portions of their power to create the material world, and in doing so they became bound to it. Their power is expended not on smiting enemies or micromanaging mortal affairs, but on maintaining the continuity of existence itself. Their role is not to interfere in every tragedy, but to ensure that the sun rises, the seasons turn, gravity pulls, souls pass, and the world does not tear itself apart. This is why the divines often appear strangely restrained compared to the Daedric princes. Each divine represents a domain that contributes directly to world stability. Mara's compassion, Zinathar's fair labor, Kynareth's breath and winds, and Archay's proper stewardship of beginnings and endings. They are non-competitive deities by design, and their worshippers reflect this. You do not see Mara's priests denouncing Archay's priests for doctrinal impurity. They coexist because their gods must coexist for the world to function. In contrast, the Daedric princes are not burdened by such constraints. They can violate, break, torment, and unmake because nothing depends on them to hold Nirn together. For Molag Bal, creating vampires was an act of iconoclasm, proof that the Aedra's careful system of transitions could be corrupted, bypassed, and mocked. The simplest metaphor for the Aedra is that they are a constellation of programs sustaining the operating system of reality. They execute tasks according to the functions they sacrifice themselves to create. They are active, but their activity is structural rather than interventionist. Mortals only notice them when they stop, for example, if Akatosh ceased to sustain time, or if Arche ceased to govern the passage of souls. Bishop Artorius Ponticus was correct when he said that Akatosh is the most active of the divines, because we perceive him every moment the clock continues to tick. His involvement is constant, seamless, and therefore invisible. The irony is that mortals, being emotional creatures, interpret divine non-intervention as divine negligence. They look up at uncaring skies and see useless gods, while simultaneously excusing Daedra for their atrocities by appealing to their nature. The same people who call Arche lazy for not resurrecting LeMay will argue that Molag Bal is not evil, but merely consistent with his sphere. Yet the victims of Daedric cruelty can hardly be blamed for feeling abandoned. To mortal eyes, desperate, grieving, anguished, the Aedra's structural contributions are, while Molag Bal's violations are loud. And in the moment of need, when a soul cries for rescue and no hand descends from the heavens, it is difficult not to feel betrayed. LeMay's tragedy captures this tension perfectly. She was not merely corrupted by a Daedric prince, she was severed from the cycle that made the Aedra relevant to her in the first place. Vampirism in the Elder Scrolls is therefore not just a disease or a curse, it is a theological rebellion, a metaphysical middle finger pointed at Arche himself. The gods of order cannot always save those who fall outside their system, and the gods of chaos delight in creating those very exceptions. That is the true horror of LeMay's tale, and the true origin of vampirism in Tamriel. And mortals, confronted with this cosmic blasphemy, did what mortals always do. They formed institutions to contain what the gods would not, and thus birthed the vigilance of Stendarr. To be clear, the vigilance of Stendarr existed long before the Dawnguard's resurgence, and for a time they were the closest thing Skyrim had to a structured anti-vampire institution. Yet, to understand their failure, it is essential to understand why they were formed in the first place. The Vigil was not conceived as a vampire hunting order, but rather as a post-Oblivion crisis reaction to the perceived moral and spiritual decay of Tamriel. With Daedric cults proliferating in the shadows, mortals trafficking with princes for power, and the trauma of the Oblivion Gates still fresh, the Vigil defined its mission around opposing Daedric influence in all its forms. Vampirism, being tied to Molag Bal, was merely one of many expressions of that corruption. In the Vigil's eyes, vampires were not existential enemies, but simply another unclean heresy to be purified alongside necromancers, witches, and artifact collectors. Their worldview was spiritual before it was strategic, and moralistic before it was militaristic. Prior to the rise of the Dawnguard, Skyrim's Vigil contained two ideological camps. The first were the Zealots, who believed Stendarr's command required preemptive crusading, fortification, and readiness for war. The second were the more casual patrolmen and preachers who saw their work as a kind of religious policing, traveling the roads, blessing villages, confiscating Daedric relics, and cracking down on small cults. It was from the first group that Isran emerged, distinguished not by piety, but by his ability to recognize that vampirism was evolving into a coordinated threat. The rest of the Vigil treated vampires as isolated vermin rather than as a hidden aristocracy plotting a long-term agenda. When Isran finally became disillusioned with the Vigil's complacency, he took the only members who understood the vampire problem with him.
Damn fool. I told him not to go. The Vigilants always had more bravery than sense. Did you at least find out what the vampires were looking for in there?
Once those extremists and pragmatists departed, what remained of the Vigil in Skyrim was ideologically rigid but strategically toothless. The post-split Vigil drifted into dysfunction almost immediately, no one seemed willing to acknowledge how dangerous the emerging Volkihar network truly was, so they returned to their comfortable routines of roadside sermons and shrine blessings rather than preparing for protracted conflict. In a world where vampires fed discreetly and avoided the sun, the vigil could have persisted indefinitely. Indeed, in such a world, the Dawn Guard itself might have been the faction doomed to collapse, spending resources on an enemy that never escalated. But the world the Vigil received was one in which Lord Harkon was actively conspiring to blot out the sun and usher in a new age of vampire dominion. Faced with this reality, the Vigil's lack of preparation became fatal. Part of their failure stemmed from a profound misunderstanding of their enemy. Vampires in Tamriel are not merely undead predators, they are agents of Molag Bal, participating in a cosmic project defined by domination, violation, and the bending of mortal will. This gives vampirism a political and theological dimension that the Vigil never grasped. While the Volkihar possessed courts, seers, infiltrators, thralls, and an elaborate network of maritime logistics across the sea of ghosts, the Vigil fielded priests with maces and faith in divine protection. They possessed no spies, no counterintelligence, no knowledge of Molag Bal's cultic structures, and no understanding of the vampire clans' social hierarchies. They believed vampires could be treated as Daedric abominations, to be smitten rather than as organized political actors with long timelines and concrete ambitions. Compounding this was a tragic irony within the Vigil's own theology. Stendarr, revered as the divine of mercy, compassion, and righteous justice, became the banner under which the Vigil pursued a mission of absolutist purging. For them, mercy toward heretics and Daedra-touched mortals was indistinguishable from enabling corruption, yet Stendarr's doctrine was never written as an endorsement of blind eradication. In many respects, the Vigilants were fanatics who did not actually understand their God. Their extremism thus derived from a misreading of their own scripture, allowing their piety to mutate into ideological zeal. And despite the theatrics of their faith, they lacked the sober realism required to counter a Daedric project of domination. Ysran's radicalism must therefore be understood in contrast to the Vigil's fanaticism, where they placed their trust in righteousness, uttering variations of, "Stendarr will protect the faithful." Ysran placed his trust in siege engines, fortified battlements, silvered weaponry, drilled troops, and contingency planning. His approach was not born of hatred but of realism. When he looked at the state of vampirism in Skyrim, he did not see abominations to be cleansed. He saw enemies preparing for war, and because he understood that war would eventually arrive, he structured the Dawn Guard accordingly. Had he reformed the Dawn Guard without a credible threat on the horizon, his efforts would have been perceived as paranoia or religious extremism in their own right, and the faction might have collapsed for lack of purpose. But in the presence of Harkon and the Volkihar, Ysran's foresight became vindication. The destruction of the Hall of the Vigilant by Volkihar forces was not merely an act of brutality. It was a strategic demonstration. The vampires deployed reconnaissance, infiltration, surprise, and overwhelming force against a religious order that believed faith and purity were sufficient protection. The massacre exposed every flaw Ysran had warned about, and revealed the Vigil to be a faction optimized for roadside crusading rather than for existential conflict. They were prepared for sinners, not soldiers, and in the face of a highly organized Daedric aristocracy, purity alone could not save them. In the end, the Vigil of Stendarr did not fail because it was weak, but because it was misaligned. It confronted vampirism as a moral stain to be cleansed, when vampirism was in fact a geopolitical, theological, and cultural threat. Their refusal to adapt, their overconfidence in divine protection, and their inability to interpret Molag Bal's project on the correct scale ensured their downfall. They believed that righteousness alone would triumph. Ysran believed survival required preparation. In Skyrim, it was Ysran, not faith, that was proven right. Thus, to understand the limits of mortal resistance, we must compare vampirism with another form of extended life leechdom, a self-fashioned state of undeath mastered by only the most disciplined and powerful necromancers. In the simplest of terms, Vampirism in the Elder Scrolls is a form of disease, whereas leechdom is a form of transcended state of being. As stated by Vastery, a Sigic companion to Mannimarco and Venus Galerian, and a leech dedicated to Azura herself. Leechdom is the pinnacle of undeath, achieved by powerful necromancers who manipulate their own souls to gain immense power and extend their lives. To become a leech, one must channel their soul through a phylactery, a complex and arduous process requiring a lifetime of study and strong will. This separation of soul and body removes limitations on magical abilities, offering virtually limitless potential. Whereas one could become vampire just by transferring the disease from another vampire or perform Daedric rituals, both resulting in varying level of power, considering the purity of said strain. Purest or true blood vampires who have gained the power directly through Molag Bal would be a very strong vampire lords, whereas others would be average superhuman blood-sucking creatures. While contesting between these two, however, at the first sight, it does seem like vampirism is much more appealing than leechdom, considering you keep your mortal body, become virtually immortal and young, while getting superhuman strengths along with multiple other powers. Personally, if you are someone who is highly ambitious, leechdom offers you immense power over vampirism, considering you do not just become immortal, but you are also invulnerable, resurrecting oneself every time you fall. Plus, the magical abilities you can master is virtually infinite, because now you have your magical limit broken, with your mortal soul gone. This is why the most ambitious and highly talented individuals seek leechdom instead of vampirism. With characters like Mannimarco surviving throughout the ages and even ascending to literal godhood, it's fair to say, even though it seems similar at face value, vampirism's still a disease which happens to you, whereas leechdom is something you seek out. Ultimately, what this tells me is that vampirism in Tamriel is less of a simple curse and more of an evolving, predatory ecosystem that refuses to stay in the dark. While many view these creatures as mindless, evil thralls, I see them as individuals, ambitious, tortured, and occasionally even altruistic, who are forced to navigate a world that wants them erased. We must distinguish between the disease of the common vampire and the calculated, transcended power of leechdom, but both paths highlight a singular truth: the pursuit of immortality always demands a terrifying price. Whether you choose the path of the noble Ravenwatch, or the blood-soaked dominance of the Volkihar, you are stepping outside the jurisdiction of the gods to claim a strength that is as seductive as it is corrupting. In my opinion, as long as the Daedra continue to mock the laws of the Aedra, the night will belong to those who were brave or desperate enough to outgrow the poison of their own blood. They are the masters of the unend, the flickering candles in a cathedral of shadow, dancing forever on the edge of a dawn, that which will never arrive. In the heart of the Merethic era, a time when dragons held dominion over the skies of Nirn and mortals lived in their formidable shadows, a man named Miraak ascended through the strict hierarchy of the dragon cult. Long before the last Dragonborn would surface in the Fourth Era amidst Skyrim's draconic resurgence, Miraak traversed the frozen expanses of ancient Solsthim and northern Tamriel as the very first of his kind. The earliest chronicles identify Miraak as a dragon priest of extraordinary talent at the zenith of the dragon cult's influence. This religious order had its roots with the ancient Atmorans, who carried their reverence for dragons with them on their migration to Tamriel. These Nordic pioneers viewed dragons as divine creatures, with Alduin the World Eater revered as the chief deity in their pantheon. The most fervent adherents of this faith rose to become dragon priests, acting as liaisons between the dragons and the general populace, enforcing the commands of their draconic overlords with absolute power. It is a tale etched not on stone, but in the very soul of a man who held the might of a dragon in his heart, and yet chose the hollow servitude of a whispering demon. This choice, as I see it, would ripple through the ages, leaving a legacy of profound and tragic arrogance, a cautionary saga of the first Dragonborn who, in his lust for power, became the architect of his own oblivion. To truly understand Miraak's journey, I believe one must look to the Merethic era, a time so ancient it feels more like myth, stretching back eons before the events of Skyrim. It was a period spanning roughly 4,000 years, an age where dragons held absolute dominion over mortals. I see Miraak in this era, likely a Nord serving as a dragon priest on the island, now known as Solstheim, in the northeastern reaches of Skyrim. His very name, Allegiance Guide, speaks volumes to me about the trust he must have initially commanded within the dragon cult. But it seems this devotion was not enough for him. A deep-seated discontent began to fester as he grew to crave more. This insatiable hunger for knowledge and power is what I believe drove him to seek out Hermaeus Mora, fundamentally contemplating a trade of one master for another. His pursuit led him, inevitably, to a black book, an artifact of immense significance, which brought him into the presence of the Daedric prince himself. It was Hermaeus Mora, in my opinion, who truly recognized Miraak's potential as the very first Dragonborn and extended the offer for him to become his champion. By accepting this pact, Miraak was gifted with a profound understanding of his dragon lineage. This unlocked his innate ability to wield the Thu'um, the dragon language, granting him the terrifying power to command dragons and consume their souls to fuel his own strength. With this newfound might, it's clear to me that he eagerly turned on the very dragons who had once been his masters. His rebellion was nothing short of relentless. I can easily believe he slaughtered dragons by the dozens, perhaps even over 100, in his obsessive quest for power. By pledging himself to Hermaeus Mora, Miraak, in my view, became the prince's ultimate champion, a master of the very destiny of dragons. The actual source of his dragonborn abilities remains a point of contention, with what I see as two plausible theories. Some speculate that these powers were a divine gift from the god Akatosh, while others believe they were a direct result of his dark pact with Hermaeus Mora. While the term dragonborn implies it's a birthright, I find the case of Alessia, who gained dragon blood later in life, suggests Akatosh can indeed bestow it. On the other hand, it's just as likely that Miraak received this blessing directly from Akatosh, which would have made him the ultimate weapon against the dragons. His defiance of the Dragon Kings paints a picture for me of a formidable, knowledge-hungry warrior, one seemingly fated to reshape the world in the pursuit of his own ambitions. I can vividly picture the scene, the betrayer, Miraak, cloaked in a mask of molten gold, his glare fierce, its vents glowing like a dwarven forge. That mask, once a gift from the dragons, now in my eyes, symbolized his allegiance to the abyssal depths. Atop his grand temple, I imagine the first dragonborn watching as Valak. The champion chosen by the loyal dragon priests approached wearing the horned mask Conoric, the warlord. Yet, Miraak stood his ground, completely unwavering. As Valak ascended to the summit and donned the warlord mask, I see a jagged, apocryphal power surging from Miraak's very form. He summoned his otherworldly weapons, with spheres of magicka coalescing in his hands. What followed, in my interpretation, was a cataclysmic showdown on the steps of that traitor's temple. Miraak versus Valak, the jailer. Miraak is forever remembered as the traitor, for this betrayal of his own kind. In contrast, another dragon priest, Valak, earned the title, the jailer, for his unwavering loyalty to the dragons. It seems to me it was Valak who discovered Miraak's dealings with Hermaeus Mora and took it upon himself to confront him. Their battle must have been on a monumental scale, something akin to a Dragon Ball Z fight, and I believe the sheer force of their conflict is what literally ripped the island of Solstheim away from the mainland of Skyrim. Ultimately, Valak managed to overpower Miraak, but just before he could deliver the final blow, Hermaeus Mora intervened, either whisking Miraak away or imprisoning him in Apocrypha, depending on which account you believe. Valak was then tasked with watching over Solstheim to ensure Miraak remained confined, which is how he truly cemented his moniker, the jailer. For ages, I see Miraak trapped by Hermaeus Mora, delving deeper into arcane lore, all the while yearning for escape and to reclaim his status. He finally succeeded in the Fourth Era, during the events of Skyrim, but his downfall was, in my opinion, inevitable, meeting his end at the hands of the very prince who once saved him. This single, fatal mistake defined the destiny of this legendary figure, leading him straight into the clutches of a Daedric prince. I've heard the tales that speak of the very land tearing asunder beneath their feet. I believe this was arcane violence of the highest order, rending the northern hinterlands and creating a great fissure where snows vanished into the world's gaping maw. As Nirn's yawn widened, the tides of the Sea of Ghosts rushed in, carving a new strait and giving birth to the island of Solstheim. Were these dragon priests truly powerful enough to reshape a continent, or were these just embellished tales? To me, the history of Tamriel is filled with whispers of such terraforming calamities, many shrouded in myth, like the sinking of Yokuda or the deluge that submerged Old Maris. The stories suggest that when the people of Yokuda were defeated, revenge was taken upon the land itself. Regarding Old Maris, it's hinted that the angry Altmeri god sank it. The true extent of the devastation caused by Miraak and Valak remains veiled, but as any storyteller knows, where there's smoke, there's fire. So little was known of Miraak before this conflict, and what little was known has been, in my view, obscured by the strange dilation of time within Apocrypha. Nevertheless, I firmly believe Miraak stood as the most formidable member of the dragon cult, an order that existed for the sole purpose of executing the will of the dragons. Being a dragonborn, Miraak was, by his very nature, a threat to that purpose. Therefore, when the tales label Valak as the guardian and Miraak as the traitor, I see these titles as entirely subjective. A traitor to dragons might not seem like a traitor in the eyes of men, and the motivations of the gods involved are never simple. When the Nords first journeyed from Atmora to the shores of Skyrim, they faced, as I see it, a world of challenges. They initially tried to establish peace with the Snow Elves, but this effort soured and erupted into a full-scale war. Yet even after their victory, their sovereignty was under constant threat as long as they remained subservient to the dragons. Nordic culture, as I understand it, deeply revered the dragon totem, making it a cornerstone of their spirituality with Alduin, the World Eater, at its very pinnacle. Alduin represented their version of Ariel, a god of time who carried the weight of a coming apocalypse. While not necessarily superior to other Nordic gods, the dragon's sheer prevalence and power in ancient times meant they assumed a paramount role in Nordic belief. Ancient texts from that era, like the Dragon War, depict the dragons fully embracing their role as god-kings over humanity. From my perspective, they saw themselves as being made in Akatosh's image, far superior to the lesser beings who worshipped them. In the dragon's mind, power equated to truth, and they embodied this truth. The dragons, I believe, used their biological superiority to justify their rule over the Nords, leaving humanity with little choice but to submit. As Paarthurnax himself put it, it was their inherent right to rule because of their innate power. This hierarchy might have lasted forever, given the Nords' reverence for dragons. However, the emergence of the dragon cult seems to have accelerated the descent. By elevating certain men to positions of power, they inadvertently planted the seeds of rebellion. These dragon priests, inspired by their masters, ruled with an iron fist in Tamriel, a far cry from their more peaceful role in Atmora. Their oppressive rule, in my opinion, reduced the populace to little more than slaves, which severely strained the people's trust in the dragons. When the rebellion finally came, the Dragon War erupted as the people rose up against draconic tyranny. The ancient lore, as I interpret it, asserts that when the time comes for an old world to perish, Alduin, the Black Dragon, will manifest on Tamriel. His arrival isn't meant to be met with mercy, but with a devastating firestorm so intense it can shift the entire Mundus into a new epoch. However, when Alduin actually emerged, claiming to be the firstborn of Akatosh, but then renouncing his sacred duty to pursue his own dominion, it plunged the North into confusion. The Nords revered their powerful dragon overlords, but I can see that unrest was brewing due to their oppression. The dragons seemed indifferent to this, delegating authority to their dragon priests and maintaining a hands-off approach. So when Alduin veered from his world-ending purpose to instead seek domination, it created a crisis. The origins of the Dragonborn remain uncertain. I suspect manipulation by Hermaeus Mora or the direct influence of Akatosh. It was amidst this turmoil that the Dragon War began, with mortals challenging dragons. Legendary heroes pleaded with Miraak, a Dragonborn, to help them slay Alduin, but he chose his own personal pursuits over the fate of humanity. It seems he arrogantly believed he could confront Alduin on his own terms if it suited his goals. Miraak's lack of involvement in the war is, to me, the pivotal moment in his entire story. His betrayal of his kin happened before the war, and it wasn't motivated by any compassion for the oppressed, but was driven solely by his own ambition. All Nords, I believe, possess an innate connection to the Thu'um, a storm voice inherent to their nature. As children of the sky, they believe the goddess Kind's breath gave them life and the ability to channel the voice. While not unique, mastering it requires rare talent. The origins of this mastery are unclear, with theories pointing to Atmora, the dragon priests, or Kine and Parthernax. For humans, mastering the voice was a significant challenge, but Miraak, as the first Dragonborn, possessed exceptional abilities, including the power to absorb dragon souls and learn shouts with incredible speed. It's clear to me he aimed to rival the dragons, not serve them, and he sought the greater power his masters withheld. This pursuit of forbidden knowledge is what led him to approach Hermaeus Mora, a daring quest to expand his power through a forbidden pact. I see Miraak as a figure of incredible audacity, boldly disregarding all the cautionary tales about Hermaeus Mora, the abyssal cephalopod, to strike a deal with the entity. Stories often depicted the woodland man as a seducer, a figure to be avoided, but Miraak was unyielding. He forged his agreement with the Gardener of Men, becoming the prince's champion in exchange for that forbidden knowledge. This, I believe, granted him powers that were completely unknown to the other priests and even the dragons themselves. From within Mora's labyrinthine realm, Miraak unearthed lost words of the ancient dragon tongue. He learned to assume the aspect of a dragon and, most significantly, gained the ability to bend dragons to his will. This was a profound act of defiance. As the Dragon War text explains, dragons believed themselves superior beings, fashioned in the likeness of the dragon god of time. Yet here was Miraak, easily absorbing their souls and channeling their essence into his own words of power. To a dragon, combat and debate were the same thing, but it's my opinion that Miraak proved himself the master debater, wielding language as a sharper weapon than any of them. As another testament to his influence, one of his acolyte priests was none other than the great Aedra. The very fact that a figure as notable as Aedra is considered Miraak's acolyte underscores the astonishing command he must have had. It seems Miraak and his followers were not welcome among the mainstream dragon cult, which is why I think they operated on the fringes of Skyrim, particularly in Solstheim. His influence undoubtedly spread from his temple, undermining both his former masters and their servants. When the Dragon War finally erupted, Miraak chose not to participate. His reasons are speculative, but I imagine he either saw no advantage in it or perhaps found some cruel amusement in watching the two sides destroy each other. I have a theory that Hermaeus Mora himself may have counseled Miraak to stay out of it. In this scenario, I believe Mora's ulterior motive was to prevent Miraak from fulfilling his true purpose in life. This neutrality during the war stands, in my mind, as the one grave mistake that sealed his doom. It may have prolonged his life, but his fate was inexorably tied to this single decision. As the war raged, men faced devastating losses. Despite the Nords having powerful mages and talented tongues, it took many men to defeat even a single weak dragon. Compounding this was the fact that the dragon priests wielded immense power themselves. Dragons, as I understand them, are essentially immortal. Their souls persist even if their bodies are destroyed. This meant humanity faced a seemingly insurmountable task. Even with some dragons defecting to help men, like Parthernax, the threat of Alduin reassembling his armies remained. The key to ending the conflict, I'm convinced, lay in consuming Alduin's soul, a feat only a legendary Dragonborn champion could achieve. This monumental task was meant to be Miraak's purpose. I can imagine Harkon One-Eye, a great warrior destined for Sovngarde, making the journey to Solstheim to seek an audience with the renegade priest. With Miraak on their side, even Alduin would have reason to fear. Miraak himself was confident in his ability to face the World Eater, even boasting about it to his heir thousands of years later. When Harkon arrived at the temple, he was surely met with bitter disappointment. Miraak's reluctance to fully betray his former masters must have shocked him, but looking at it, there were so many reasons why Miraak should have helped the Nords. From the way he spoke, it's obvious to me that he relished power and control. With the blood of dragons in his veins, he shared their ruthless ambition. Given these traits, it seems almost unbelievable that he would pass up the chance to defeat the greatest living dragon. This was his opportunity to eliminate his biggest rival and be venerated as a hero across the entire North. I believe the Nords would have readily accepted him as their leader, not to mention the immense knowledge he would have gained from absorbing Alduin's soul. To me, there is only one reason why Miraak would choose not to intervene. He must have received a more enticing offer. I firmly believe this offer came from Hermaeus Mora. My theory is that the Gardener of Men intentionally manipulated fate by luring Miraak away from his destiny. This created a vacuum. Someone still needed to confront Alduin. If Miraak was taken into Apocrypha, that responsibility would have to be passed down to a future Dragonborn. But before we explore that future, I think it's crucial to delve into the complex nature of what it even means to be Dragonborn. The confusion, as I see it, often lies in distinguishing between the Nordic Dragonborn heroes and the Dragonborn emperors of Cyrodiil. However, at their core, I believe these legendary figures all trace their lineage back to the will of one pivotal deity, Shor, or as others know him, Lorkhan, or even his opposite, Akatosh. To be Dragonborn, or Dovahkiin, is to be blessed with the blood and soul of a dragon, which gives one an inherent link to the fabric of time as governed by Akatosh. A follower of Mehrunes Dagon once referred to both Dragonborn and dragons as fragments of Akatosh's very being. I have a theory that Akatosh himself is fragmented, fractured like an hourglass thrown from a mountaintop. From this perspective, dragons and the various gods like Ariel, Akatosh, and Alduin are all just shards of a greater Akatosh oversoul. It's a complex idea, but for now, what matters is the Dragonborn's connection to this eternal power. Interestingly, Miraak existed as a Dragonborn long before the deity we now call Akatosh was widely recognized. Akatosh, in my opinion, is a Cyrodiilic deity, linked to the rise of Alessia's empire. Before him, the Nords had Alduin, the World Eater, and the Elves had Ariel, the Eagle King. Despite their different mythologies, I see both Alduin and Ariel as Anuit gods who are fundamentally opposed to the mortal realm's existence. Alduin is the devourer of worlds, while Ariel represents a purity that longs to escape mortality. Both wanted to end the Mundus, just for different reasons. So if Akatosh is another aspect of this same spirit, why would this version seek to preserve the mortal realm? This conflict, to me, reflects the enigmatic nature of Akatosh. I have an intriguing notion that Akatosh, as he is commonly known, is merely a mask a cosmopolitan guise created to appease the masses. When Saint Alessia established the 8 divines, she notably omitted Shor, the chief god of the Nords, also known as Larkin. In my view, this was a political move. She renamed Shor as Shazar, demoting him, and then amalgamated key aspects of the Nordic Shor with the elven Ariel to create a new, two-headed deity, Akatosh. By making Akatosh the chief deity, a significant conflict was sown into the very fabric of religion, one that would cause dragon-breaking problems. Later on, Imperial art often depicts Akatosh as a two-headed figure, one a dragon, the other a man. I believe this unintentionally recreated the ancient cosmic conflict between Anu and Padome. This dichotomy is essential to understanding the different manifestations of the Dragonborn, whether they are Nordic or Imperial. Their shared destiny, as I see it, is to safeguard Lorkhan's divine creation, Mundus. After Miraak, the next to bear the dragon blood was the slave Queen Alessia. Legend speaks of a covenant she made with Akatosh, symbolized by the Amulet of Kings. Akatosh pledged that as long as her descendants wore the amulet and kept the dragonfires lit, the gates of oblivion would remain sealed. But the heart Akatosh refers to here, I believe, is not his own, it's the heart of Lorcan. Encased within the Amulet of Kings is the Chamel Adabal, a red gem infused with the blood of Lorcan. A ballad tells of how Lorcan tore out his own heart and flung it across Tamriel, where its blood pooled and formed a red crystal, forever embodying his essence. When Miraak abandoned his duty during the Dragon War, the ancient Nordic heroes, in my view, had no choice but to use an Elder Scroll to banish Alduin forward in time.
Let those that watch from Sovngarde envy us this day.
What have you done? What twisted words have you created?
But this was only a temporary solution, and the responsibility would eventually fall to another. While Miraak evaded his fate in Apocrypha, destiny simply wove a new thread, foretelling the arrival of Miraak's successor in the prophecy of the Dragonborn. The prophecy, as I read it, stated that when the world was in chaos, the World Eater would return, and fate would turn upon the last Dragonborn. The last Dragonborn's vanquishing of Alduin, therefore, fulfilled the purpose originally intended for Miraak, rendering him redundant in the eyes of fate and the gods. It seems inevitable, then, that the last Dragonborn was led to Solstheim, where Miraak's corrupting influence was poisoning the minds of the locals. Hermaeus Mora, fully aware of this unfolding destiny, made his presence known to this new hero, offering an alliance.
I am the mystery at the end of existence. The first secret whispered at the dawn of creation. I am the guardian of the unseen, and the question unanswerable. I hold the knowledge forbidden and untangle the threads of fate. I am the one who knows.
Different people have very different experiences when reading these books. You're still acting surprisingly sane, too. What did he have to say? He must have wanted something from you. What secrets could they have worth keeping from old Nora? Sounds like a bargain to me. Hermaeus Mora learned some fascinating new ways to skin a hawker, and you become the second most powerful dragonborn that ever lived.
Understanding that Miraak's ambition would ultimately lead to rebellion, Hermaeus Mora, in my opinion, simply chose to back a new champion. And so, after millennia, Miraak was forced to face the consequences of his critical error. Atop the summit of Apocrypha, the first Dragonborn met his defeat at the hands of the very hero whose existence was necessitated by his own negligence. Whether it was Mora's whispers or Miraak's own arrogance that led him to spare Alduin, the result was the same. The last Dragonborn's existence was inextricably linked to that failure. It appears to me that Miraak had gathered a group of fellow dragon priests, Azidal, Dukan, and Zakrasos, whom he dubbed the Acolyte Priests. Regarding his status as the first Dragonborn, my belief aligns with the theory that Akatosh granted him this power specifically to counter the threat posed by Alduin. I don't think he was born with it. It was a gift, a tool for a specific purpose that he ultimately refused to use correctly. The significance of prophecy in these events cannot be overstated. The prophecy of the Dragonborn, depicted on Alduin's wall, foretold that the last Dragonborn would be the one to finally vanquish Alduin. This was the ultimate culmination of the saga, but as I've pieced it together, it never had to unfold that way. Thousands of years prior, Miraak was effortlessly slaying dragons. Yet, when given the chance to face the mightiest of them all, he declined out of sheer hubris. This suspension of his role as the hero, I believe, is what truly set the stage for everything that followed. The choices made by the first Dragonborn directly necessitated the actions of his eventual successor. So, when the last Dragonborn arrives on Solstheim, the situation I see is one of bizarre enchantment. The island's inhabitants are enthralled, forced into menial labor around the Allmaker stones, which Miraak had learned to corrupt with his malevolent magic. It's my belief this was all part of his plan to gather power and finally escape from Apocrypha. Alongside these unwitting slaves, he also commanded a cult of willing devotees. It is these cultists who likely bring his presence to your attention by attacking you. Your investigation leads you to his temple and to one of Hermaeus Mora's black books. These books, as I understand them, are dangerous artifacts that can transport mortals to Apocrypha.
The time comes soon when... What? Who are you to dare set foot here? You are Dragonborn. I can feel it. And yet... So you have slain Alduin. Well done. I could have slain him myself back when I walked the earth. But I chose a different path. You have no idea of the true power a Dragonborn can wield. This realm is beyond. You have no power here. And it is only a matter of time before Solstheim is also mine. I already control the minds of its people. Soon they will finish building my temple, and I can return home. Send her back where she came from. She can await my arrival with the rest of Tamriel.
What happened to you? You read the book and then... It seemed as though you were not really here. Where? Where is he? Can we reach him? Can we kill him? This is a dangerous thing, then. We should return to my village and show this to my father. Perhaps Thorn can make sense of what is going on.
Upon reading 1, you come face to face with Miraak himself, who belittles you before sending you back. From then on, his looming threat becomes more evident as he begins to intervene and steal the souls of the dragons you slay. The only way forward, it seems, is to work with the local Skal to cleanse the Allmaker stones, weakening Miraak's power, while also delving into other black books, all under the watchful eye of Hermaeus Mora. At the climax, the two Dragonborns finally meet atop Apocrypha's summit.
No, not yet. We should greet our guest first. And so the first Dragonborn meets the last Dragonborn at the summit of Apocrypha. No doubt, just as Hermaeus Mora intended. He is a fickle master, you know. But now I will be free of him. My time in Apocrypha is over. You are here in your full power, and thus subject to my full power. You will die, and with the power of your soul, I will return to Solstheim and be master of my own fate once again.
I find Miraak to be an intriguing adversary. He's not some ancient dragon, just a Nord who, through millennia of studying forbidden magic, has become immensely powerful. His failure, to me, is the epitome of colossal opportunity squandered by hubris. Like so many villains, he overestimated himself and underestimated his opponent. He might acknowledge your victory over Alduin, but only to boast that he could have done the same. The parallel is striking. A chosen one turns from his destiny for selfish reasons, rebels against his masters, and is ultimately defeated by a hero who remained loyal to the original path. The crucial difference, in my eyes, is that Miraak finds no redemption. He remains committed to the very path that led to his long imprisonment and eventual death. And so the curtain falls on the man who lived 1,000 lifetimes in the shadow of a demon, only to find that time as a hunter that never tires. He believed himself the master of his destiny, a reader of forbidden texts, yet he was merely a character in a prophecy he refused to read. What a bitter irony it must have been to be impaled not by the hero he created through his own cowardice, but by the very tentacle of the master he so foolishly served. In the end, I see Mirek not as a tragic figure, but as a monument to selfish ambition, a hollow legend whose colossal power was a squandered gift, undone by the one opponent he could never outsmart, his own reflection in the eyes of a truer hero. His story is a chilling whisper from Apocrypha that one cannot turn their back on destiny without it, eventually turning on them. In the biting winds of Skyrim, a name is carried like the thunder of an avalanche. Ulfric Stormcloak, a true tragic hero whose greatness is irrevocably chained to a single, devastating flaw. In my view, that flaw is a ruinous combination of his own unyielding pride and a sense of honor so rigid it becomes a cage. He is the storm that seeks to save Skyrim, yet threatens to tear it apart in the process, a man whose virtues are the very source of his damnation. It is far too easy, I find, to see him as a simple caricature, a two-dimensional rebel crafted to mirror the political squabbles of our own world. But to do so, I think, is to miss the roaring heart of the tragedy that is brewing within populace of Skyrim.
Tell me, Galmar, why do you fight for me?
How many of their sons and daughters follow your banner? We are their families. I'll die before elves dictate the fates of men. Are we not one in this? How long are you going to wait? The people are behind you. We're ready when you are.
Well put, friend. I fight for the men I've held in my arms, dying on foreign soil. I fight for their wives and children whose names I heard whispered in their last breath. I fight for we few who did come home, only to find our country full of strangers wearing familiar faces. I fight for my people, impoverished to pay the debts of an empire too weak to rule them, yet brands them criminals for wanting to rule themselves. I fight so that all the fighting I've already done hasn't been for nothing. I fight because I must.
During the Great War, as the sun cast its first light, I picture the two armies colliding on the outskirts of Cheydinhal. The air, I imagine, was filled with the golden shimmer of Aldmeri arrows, a deadly volley from Countess Arenelia's archers aimed at Janna's infantry as they navigated the treacherous underbrush. The very forest became a combatant, its tangled roots and dense growth impeding the soldiers' every step. I see General Janna, a true Nord at heart, leading her legion in a furious charge that slammed into the Dominion lines with an earth-shattering impact. The symphony of battle, a metallic clang of swords and armor, must have echoed for miles, punctuated by the deadly rhythm of maces and morning stars. The Dominion's cavalry, however, were clever, using the forest cover for swift, brutal Hytandran attacks that sowed chaos among the general's forces. This grueling battle, as I understand it, stretched on for days, a bloody stalemate born of sheer willpower. Exhaustion and fear surely took their toll. Yet the fighting spirit of the soldiers on both sides refused to break. The forest floor became a gruesome carpet of the fallen. The Nibin River and the Red Ring Road became the battle's nexus, with both armies desperately fighting for control of the bridge spanning the Upper Nebin. Countess Arenelia's troops made a move to destroy the bridge, a strategic blow to choke General Janna's advance. But before they could act, a thundering roar ripped through the sky. I can only imagine their shock as they felt their bodies go weightless. A whole legion of Aldmeri soldiers sent flying through the air in an instant. As the Dominion leaders advanced toward the bridge, I see a lone figure standing against the golden tide of the elven army. Unlike the ornate, gold-plated elves, this man, to me, needed no such finery. He was a mountain of a man in steel plate armor, draped in dense furs, resembling a colossal bear. His war cry, I'm told, echoed across Lake Rumer, inspiring his equally fearsome men. This was my first real glimpse into the legend of Ulfric Stormcloak. the man who could single-handedly turn a golden opposition into a crimson canvas. But as any warrior knows, while you can turn the tide of battle, the tide can just as easily turn on you. This is precisely what I believe happened to Ulfric. Despite his heroic leadership and dominance on the field, he was eventually overrun and captured by the Dominion. The Empire, in my opinion, had no idea at the time that this single event would set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the future of Tamriel, unlike the brute force tactics of some Cyrodiilic emperors. The Thalmor have always struck me as master manipulators who prefer to outwit their foes. They understood that the best way to defeat their enemies was to have them defeat each other. This is why, in my estimation, the capture of Ulfric's Stormcloak was one of their most crucial victories of the Great War. The psychological game that Elenwen, the Thalmor ambassador, would play with Ulfric was destined to become the cornerstone of a plan that would give the Thalmor an immense advantage in the wars to come. From what I can piece together, his interrogator managed to extract valuable intelligence from him in a move of brilliant, sadistic cruelty. Elenwen, I believe, deliberately led Ulfric to think that the information he gave up was the key to the Aldmeri Dominion's capture of the Imperial City. The devastating truth, however, was that the capital had already fallen before he broke. Then, in what I see as a calculated move to preserve her asset, she allowed Ulfric to escape. After all, she knew he had a major role yet to play in the destabilization of the Empire. To me, Ulfric Stormcloak has always been a physical titan, a charismatic leader, and a man of immense will. However, I've never seen him as a strategic genius. He is a powerful political figurehead, but what makes him so beloved by his followers is his passionate and often impulsive audacity. The Thalmor, I am convinced, were gambling on their ability to exploit this very passion. Burdened by the crushing weight of a failure he believed was his own, Ulfric was desperate to wash away that shame with glory. Before everything, very little is known for certain about Ulfric's life before the year 176 of the Fourth Era, so any stories from his childhood are, in my view, speculative at best. But from these speculations, I can paint a picture. He was born in Windhelm to Jarl Hogue Stormcloak and Lady Stoneheart, but I believe his mother's death in childbirth created a deep rift between him and his father. I see a young Ulfric finding comfort not in his distant father, but in the epic tales of ancient Nordic heroes, which ignited his passionate love for Skyrim. He would apparently pester the court wizard, Wulfharth, with endless questions about these legends until the wizard finally banished him from his sight. Undeterred, I imagine Ulfric continued to explore Windhelm, absorbing its culture. He frequented taverns to hear the bard's songs, watched the chaos of the market, and learned about his people. There was, however, one area of the city he was forbidden to enter, the Grey Quarter, a section his own grandfather had granted to Dark Elf refugees. As a young, moody, and fiery child, Ulfric, I think, couldn't grasp why his grandfather would welcome elves into the city, and he likely challenged his father's decision to let them stay. It was only after speaking with Lorthaim, the head of the Temple of Talos, that he started to understand the bigger picture. Lorthaim, I believe, taught him about Talos, the man's role in creating the Empire, and his divine ascension. Ulfric learned that the Dummer, while traditional enemies, could be valuable allies against far greater threats. He came to see the wisdom in his grandfather's mercy and the Nordic tradition of helping those in need. Following this, Ulfric learned of the Greybeards, the legendary masters of the Way of the Voice, who had taught Talos himself the art of the Thu'um from their monastery at High Hrothgar. I believe he became obsessed with the idea of going there and begged his distant father for permission. Despite their strained relationship, Jarl Hogue granted his son's wish, arranging for Ulfric to begin the arduous 7,000-step climb. Fueled by a burning passion, I can easily believe the stories that Ulfric reached the doors of High Hrothgar in a single, breathless ascent. There, the Greybeards asked if he was willing to forsake the world, his titles, and his ambitions to dedicate his life to the worship of Kine. At that time, he readily agreed and began his training, learning at what I'm sure was an incredible speed. During his studies at High Hrothgar, Ulfric was primarily mentored by Arngir. The other Greybeards, in my opinion, were likely too engrossed in their own advanced meditations to bother with a novice. Arngir taught him the tenets of Kine, pushed him to explore the philosophy behind the Way of the Voice, and recounted the history of its founder, Jurgen Windcaller. They surely discussed the transformation of the Thuum from a weapon of war to an instrument of worship. Arngir, though a dedicated teacher, was stern and possessed a stubbornness that I think matched Ulfric's own. It was another elder Greybeard, Einarth, who I believe played the crucial role in tempering Ulfric's fiery spirit. Einarth offered him comfort, monitored his progress, and gave him approval. Despite his occasional clashes with Arngir, I think Ulfric found a sense of peace and purpose at High Hrothgar, a deeper understanding of the world, and a feeling of belonging he had never known. A major shift occurred while Ulfric was at the monastery. From the peaks of High Hrothgar, they observed Imperial legions marching south, seemingly responding to some unknown threat. An atmosphere of unease, I imagine, settled over the mountains. Soon, word arrived from Ivarstead. The Empire was at war with the Aldmeri Dominion, an enemy bent on crushing the lands of men and, most heretically, banning the worship of Talos. Day and night, I can picture him arguing with the Greybeards, insisting he must go down and fight for Skyrim, just as Jurgen Windcaller had done ages before. He must have been torn between his sacred vows to the Greybeards and his duty to his homeland. In the end, he chose the latter. His departure from High Hrothgar, I believe, was not just the beginning of his involvement in the Great War. It was the moment he chose the path of the sword over the path of peace, a choice that would define the rest of his life. The Markarth incident and biased accounts. During the Great War between the years 174 and 176 of the Fourth Era, I understand that Ulfric heard news that the troublesome folk of the Reach had exploited the chaos of the war to seize the city of Markarth for themselves. Without a moment's hesitation, he leaped at the chance for glorious battle to stop them. As a Stormcloak from the East March, he had no personal stake in a savage uprising on the opposite side of the province. But as I see it, his staunch Nordic pride and his belief in strength and honor compelled him to act against the Forsworn in the name of justice. The Empire, its strength divided, couldn't spare any men to liberate Markarth, so they gave their official sanction to Ulfric Stormcloak and his forces. Many accounts of what happened next, an event now known as the Markarth Incident, have been told. However, what truly transpired is, in my opinion, heavily obscured by the biased perspectives of the storytellers. According to Arianus Arius, an imperial scholar who wrote The Bear of Markarth, Ulfric is painted in a very negative light. He claims that while Ulfric was hailed as a hero for putting down the Forsworn, the war crimes he committed were dishonorable and barbaric. Coming from an imperial scholar, this account, to me, reads less like a fair historical record and more like a piece of propaganda against a future rebel. I find it deeply ironic to hear an imperial scholar criticize the Nords for maintaining control of their own territory and making an example of dissidents. To heighten the irony, he even cites Tiber Septim as an example of an exemplary leader while labeling the Nords' actions as dishonorable. This is, in my opinion, absurd, considering that Tiber Septim was a warmongering egomaniac who used the Numidium, a weapon of mass destruction, for his conquests. This isn't to say that I believe Ulfric's actions during the Markarth incident were just and honorable. My point is that neither Tiber Septim nor Ulfric can be seen as entirely in a positive light. It's even possible that the accounts in the Bear of Markarth are 100% accurate, as there's no strong evidence to contradict them. But even if that's true, it doesn't mean the Empire's narrative, which vilifies Ulfric while glorifying its own history, is the whole truth. So, what do I believe really happened in the Reach? According to the Thalmor dossier on Ulfric, he first caught their attention during the Great War when he was taken as a prisoner. Recognizing his potential value as the son of the Jarl of Windhelm, he was assigned to First Emissary Elenwen as a strategic asset. During his torture, he was manipulated into believing that his information was crucial in the capture of the Imperial city. even though the city had already fallen. After the war, Ulfric was allowed to escape, and contact was later reestablished, where he apparently proved valuable to the Thalmor. The dossier also states that Ulfric's death is to be avoided, as is a decisive Stormcloak victory. To me, this is the smoking gun. It's clear evidence that the Thalmor are puppeteering the Stormcloaks whenever they can, aiming to prolong the conflict. The Stormcloaks, as I understand it, were initially a militia of Talos-worshipping Nords led by Ulfric, but they were not in open rebellion before the Markarth incident. Therefore, I think it's inaccurate to say that Ulfric started the civil war solely to please the Thalmor. This major escalation only happened after Markarth, and the Thalmor dossier itself notes he became uncooperative after this event. The original White Gold Concordat did ban Talos worship, but in my reading of the situation, it did not explicitly grant the Thalmor the right to enter Imperial territory and arrest citizens at will. This action by the Thalmor was, in my view, a violation of the Empire's sovereignty. I believe Titus Mede II signed the treaty expecting that the Thalmor would have no direct presence in Skyrim, and that the ban would be managed solely by Imperial officials. This is a crucial distinction because it left the Empire room to maneuver. Essentially, the Empire was supposed to officially ban Talos worship, but unofficially tolerate it in private. While officials had to arrest the most outspoken worshippers, it's pretty clear to me they were instructed to do a terrible job of it, as long as people were discreet. For example, I'm certain General Tullius knows his own legate, Ricca, is a closet Talos worshipper, but chooses to ignore it. After Ulfric's execution, Ricca mutters,
Talos be with you. What was that like? Nothing. Just saying goodbye.
This tells me that Imperial officials were far from cooperative in enforcing the ban. Cities like Markarth and Whiterun still have prominent statues of Talos, and Thalmor agents like Ondalmar in Markarth struggle to find a single Talos worshipper without the Dragonborn's help. Jarls Igmund and Balgruuf don't seem to be actively helping the Thalmor at all. While Heimskar, the Loudmouth preacher in Whiterun, is eventually arrested if the Stormcloaks don't take the city, he's held in Dragon's Reach, not handed over to the Thalmor. It seems to me that Balgruuf, forced to make an arrest, deliberately kept him in Whiterun to save him from torture and death at the hands of the elves. It appears that most Imperial-aligned officials in Skyrim are not fully cooperating with the Thalmor. Even Elisif, the widow of High King Turig, secretly asks the Dragonborn to perform Talos funeral rites, despite hosting the Thalmor embassy in her city. This suggests to me that many loyalists only act against Talos worshippers when they fear the Thalmor will discover their inaction. This is confirmed by one of Alvar's dialogues in Riverwood. He explains that after the treaty,
It's from that treaty that ended the Great War, remember? When the Emperor was forced by the Thalmor to outlaw Talos worship, we didn't pay much attention to it when I was a boy. Everyone still had their little shrine to Talos. But then, Ulfric and his sons of Skyrim started agitating about it. Sure enough, the Emperor had to crack down, dragging people off in the middle of the night. One of the main causes of this war, if you ask me.
nobody paid much attention to the ban until Ulfric and his Sons of Skyrim started making noise about it, which forced the Emperor to crack down. There was, in my opinion, a transition period where the Concordat was technically in effect but not enforced. It was Ulfric's agitation, according to Alvar, that forced Titus Mede's hand. Another justiciar confirms this.
I lead the justiciars. We are charged with enforcing the ban on Talos worship. We're making sure your Emperor wasn't lying to his elven masters when he agreed the Empire would give up false gods and foolish beliefs.
The Markarth incident, I believe, was the key. An Imperial Jarl, Hrolfr, allowed open Talos worship in Markarth, a blatant violation of the treaty. If the Thalmor had discovered this, it would have likely meant an increased Thalmor military presence in Skyrim. The incident was used as proof that the Empire would only honor the treaty if forced to by Thalmor agents within its own borders. The Thalmor Justiciar patrols we see in Skyrim, in my view, were not part of the original treaty, but a later compromise forced upon the Empire. Jarl Egmund himself explains it perfectly. He admits they promised Ulfric's militia free worship in exchange for retaking the Reach. When the elves found out, it was either arrest Ulfric or face another war with the Dominion. The choice was clear, but for Ulfric, this was the ultimate betrayal, the founding day of the Stormcloak Rebellion. One has to wonder why the Markarth incident was considered beneficial to the Thalmor. Surely, it would have been in their interest to let the conflict between the Nords and the Forsworn fester to weaken the province. But instead, Ulfric allowed an Imperial-aligned Jarl to retake the city. This is because, as I see it, the Thalmor wanted the civil war to go on for as long as possible, and the White Gold Concordat wasn't causing enough internal conflict on its own. The citizens complained but remained loyal. The Thalmor realized they needed to back the Empire into a corner. Citizens would only rebel if the Empire committed a horrible act against Talos worshippers. And Markarth provided the perfect opportunity. From the Thalmor's strategic viewpoint, the Great War had been a disaster for them in the long run. While they got the concessions they wanted, the Empire was unlikely to enforce the Talos ban seriously, and the fast-breeding humans would be ready for another war long before the elves. They needed two things: a way to force the Empire to let them police the treaty, and something to bleed the Empire's strength while they rebuilt. Elenwen, I believe, saw Ulfric's adventure in the Reach as a way to kill two birds with one stone. Jarl Rolfdir was desperate to retake Markarth. The Empire couldn't help him. Ulfric, burning with shame from his capture and interrogation, was on a quest to restore his honor. He overthrew the Forsworn rebels, and the city was liberated. Immediately after, Elenwen seized the opportunity to file a formal protest with the Empire. The Legion was sent to reclaim the city. Here, Ulfric's pride and honor became his downfall. He had promised the people free worship, and he refused to open the gates without that guarantee. The Legion couldn't agree without risking another war. This created the perfect conflict. Ulfric was arrested for violating the Concordat, likely with a Thalmor contingent present to witness it. I can just imagine Elenwen being among them. She had just given the Dominion the leverage it needed to police the treaty, and had fanned the sparks of a civil war. Imagine her standing there, newly promoted, as Ulfric is taken away. The sense of betrayal and rising anger he must have felt is unimaginable to me. If he ever wanted to manipulate his people into a rebellion, this single moment would have been all the fuel he needed. From there, he went to jail, was eventually released upon his father's death, and took up his title as Jarl of Windhelm, his path of rebellion now set in stone. When High King Isled died, the ancient Nordic custom of the Moot was convened to confirm the new High King, even though imperial rule had made it little more than a formality. Eslod had an heir, Torrig, and I believe most of the court in Solitude was ready to see the succession pass to him without issue. But there were a few Jarls at that Moot who would not stand for another imperial puppet on Skyrim's throne, and foremost among them, of course, was Ulfric Stormcloak, according to the court wizard, Sibyl Stenter.
But Ulfric was at that moot, continually talking about Skyrim's independence in terms just shy of treason. By Nord custom, once the challenge was issued in court, Torrig had no choice but to accept. Had he not, Ulfric would have had cause to call a new moot and a new vote for High King. I don't think Ulfric knew how much Torrig respected him for that. If Ulfric had asked Torrig directly to stand up, to declare independence, Torrig might have done it.
Despite his protests, Torrig was named High King, and the arguments for independence were set aside. But I am sure Ulfric would not take no for an answer. When he next came to Solitude and requested an audience with the High King, he did not come to talk.
I saved this city, and all your worthless lives.
I demand a trial by combat.
The gates were opened for the Jarl of Windhelm, but when the palace door swung open, I think the king realized Ulfric had not come for a debate. Ulfric Stormcloak, in a bold and dramatic move, invoked ancient Nordic tradition and challenged the High King to a duel. As Stenter states, by Nord custom, once the challenge was issued, Torrig had no choice but to accept. To refuse would have given Ulfric cause to call a new moot and a new vote. And so, in the palace gardens, young Torrig, who I believe had immense respect for the decorated war hero before him, stood to face his challenger. Torrig's trembling hand reached for his sword, but before he could even draw it, Ulfric's lips parted. A powerful shout sent Torrig sprawling, his head cracking against a stone. Disoriented, his eyes fixed on the sky above, he must have seen the blue banner of Windhelm in his mind. As he looked down, Ulfric stood over him. The tip of Ulfric's blade pierced his chest, and his life leaked out of him in a clumsy, incoherent rattle as he ascended to Sovngarde. High King Torrig was dead. Why do the Nords care so much about Talos? You might be wondering, as I once did, why the Nords care so passionately about Talos worship. After all, isn't Talos just the ascended form of Tiber Septim, the founder of the Third Empire? Isn't he a symbol of the very empire they are fighting against? To understand this, I think we need to look at the complex and contradictory lore surrounding him. According to some sources like the Arcturian Heresy, Tiber Septim was not a Nord from Atmora, but was born Hjalti Earlybeard, a Breton from High Rock. He only took the Cyrodiilic name to legitimize his rule. Furthermore, these texts suggest he achieved divinity not through honor and will, but through deceit, by betraying his allies Wulfharth and Zurin Arctis and using their souls to power the Numidium. This combined spirit of three beings is what truly became Talos. It's puzzling to me that the Nords don't critically analyze the imperial propaganda, which contradicts more accurate accounts of Tamriel's history. For instance, the last migration from Atmora was in the First Era, and the continent was described as uninhabitable. This lack of critical thinking, I believe, can be attributed to the Nords' historical disinterest in written texts. It's not that they are ignorant of the inconsistencies, it's that they consciously choose to ignore them. For Nords, their literary tradition is about telling the most compelling story, not the most accurate one. The essence of understanding Skyrim, in my opinion, lies in appreciating its myths as a unified whole. The Nordic faith is decentralized and has been shaped by millennia of oral tradition, leading to contradictions and borrowed elements. Nords, I've found, embrace this mythic diversity and enjoy blending their legends together. To put it simply, regardless of his true origin, Talos is a god the Nords staunchly believe in. To them, he is from Atmora, not High Rock. Nords, in my experience, prefer direct action over finding loopholes. Rather than quietly navigating the rules of the White Gold Concordat, they would rather outright reject anyone's claim to their land and beliefs. But more than anything, I think the Nords are so devoted to Talos because he is intrinsically linked to their vision of the afterlife, Sovngarde. Sovngarde is the rivered heaven of the Nords, a place in Aetherius where the greatest heroes go to enjoy an eternity of feasting and celebration. This realm is ruled by Shor, the Nordic version of Lorkhan, whom Talos is said to have mantled. It is exclusively for true Nords who die courageously in battle. So, you see, banning the worship of Talos is, in their eyes, a ban on their very culture, and most importantly, a ban on their entry into their glorious heaven. From Ulfric's perspective, and indeed from the perspective of many in Tamriel, I see Titus Mede too as an old man who surrendered everything to the Thalmor. Signing the White Gold Concordat was, by any measure, an insult to the citizens of the Empire and their values. It took away their freedom to worship Talos, the founder of their empire and a hero to all men. By doing so, they denied the sacrifices of everyone who fought and died to defend Skyrim. Men went to war only to be forced to obey the rules of a foreign power and risk execution for beliefs as old as the Empire itself. By taking that away, the Thalmor, with the Empire's complicity, destroyed the very foundations of Nordic culture. Anyone would rebel under these conditions, and seeing Hammerfell successfully secede from the Empire only encouraged the Nords to do the same. From the viewpoint of the average citizen, the Empire is not only unable to fight off foreign invaders, but is also incapable of defending its own people and their rights. It appears corrupted to its very core. So, is there a real chance the Stormcloaks could win? Looking at it objectively, I think so. The first thing to consider is that the Empire in Skyrim is not at full strength. Yes, they have better trained and better equipped soldiers, but I believe that alone doesn't guarantee victory. The Stormcloaks could theoretically weaken the Empire's resolve to the point where a strategic withdrawal becomes the most logical option. The Empire has to choose between pouring resources into holding the North or keeping them in the Heartland for the inevitable next war with the Aldmeri Dominion. Their resources are vast, but not infinite, a fact Ulfric surely knows. The Stormcloaks, I'd argue, are not just farmers with pitchforks. Many of them are veterans of the Great War, former Imperial Legion soldiers who fought against the Dominion. Ulfric, Galmar, and even the Imperial Legate Ricca all served in the Legion. This means all the tactical knowledge available to the Empire is also available to the Stormcloak leadership, who can pass it down to their soldiers. Furthermore, the Imperial forces in Skyrim are stretched thin, leeching resources from Hafingar Hold. This tells me they aren't even getting enough logistical support from Cyrodiil. Ulfric could simply raid the farms near Solitude and cripple the Legion's food supply. And even if Ulfric dies, I don't think the rebellion dies with him. He may have started it, but every Nord feels the need to fight for their beliefs and their afterlife. They would just make a martyr out of him, and the rebellion might burn even hotter. I know that many Legion soldiers in Skyrim are local Nord recruits, but I see a problem with that. They are used to fighting in furs and leathers, which allow for agility in the cold. When you put them in heavy plate armor, you take away their traditional tactics. Plus, the Imperial armor is heavy, noisy, and shines in the snow. To me, the Imperials are a military culture, but not in the same way the Nords are. They are soldiers, whereas the Nords are warriors. A book in the game states, for the Nord is a warrior race, and all from the goat farmer to the Skald King own an armament of some kind. This suggests to me that every Nord knows how to fight, while Imperial citizens leave the fighting to the Legion. The Nords have fought nearly every enemy imaginable, from snow elves and Dwemer to dragons. The first empire of the Nords stretched from High Rock to Morrowind. These people know how to fight. Skyrim has never been conquered. It has always joined and left the Empire of its own free will. This isn't the first time they've fought the Empire, and I doubt it will be the last. I'm not saying the Nords would win easily, but I think it's premature to dismiss their chances completely. Ulfric, in my opinion, knows that the Empire is not the united front against the Thalmor that it claims to be. He sees that Cyrodiil will always sell out the provinces to keep power centralized, just as they did with Hammerfell. For him, liberating Skyrim is simply stopping the bleeding. Cyrodiil recalled all troops from Morrowind during the Oblivion Crisis, leaving them to die. They gave away half of Hammerfell in the White Gold Concordat, and then sided with the Thalmor when the rest of Hammerfell objected. They disbanded the Blades and allowed the Thalmor to hunt them down. While the Empire claims these are temporary measures for a future war, I see it as a willingness to betray its provinces to maintain the Imperial city's independence on paper. From Ulfric's perspective, the Thalmor are a constant threat, and the Imperial court is giving away the entire Empire, turning it into a puppet state. He points out that every time he has tried to defend Skyrim, the Empire has sided with the Thalmor and given up more of his people's rights. By the time the game starts, the Thalmor have a fortress-like embassy in Skyrim, host influential figures, have a commander in the wealthiest city, and operate agents who kidnap and kill with impunity. Ulfric, I believe, doesn't see this as a Cold War. He sees it as a subtle invasion by diplomats, with the Empire being outmaneuvered at every turn. And in response to the claim that he's a racist prick, I think we need some context. First, the Dwemer are elves, and given the history of conflict, some prejudices, while not excusable, are understandable. The Dwemer came to Skyrim as refugees, and were given a place to live, which was a generous act in a racially divided world. While some Dwemer feel their concerns are ignored, it's possible Ulfric is simply too focused on the war to be fully informed, leaving city matters to Yorleif. In the context of his world, Ulfric's racism, if any, is not particularly overt. Dwemer culture itself has terms like Anwa and practices slavery. The Thalmor are actively trying to cleanse the world of lesser races. The Altmer sing songs about men being swine. The Bretons were a race abused into existence. Beast races were enslaved for centuries. Racism and blood feuds are, unfortunately, the common language of Nirn. In that context, Ulfric is hardly unusual. Empire or the Stormcloaks. So, after all this, who should we side with? As I've come to understand it, the entire civil war is a Thalmor scheme. From the moment they captured Ulfric, their plans were in motion. The greater the divide between the Empire and Skyrim, the better it is for the Aldmeri Dominion, whose ultimate goal is the conquest of all of Tamriel. So, I don't have a simple answer for you because it's an endless debate. What I will say is this: if you operate purely on logic, you'd likely pick the Empire. But if you listen to your heart, you'd probably go with the Stormcloaks. And if you have both a logical mind and a feeling heart, well, then I suppose you wouldn't bother with the civil war at all. And thus, at the end, he is a specter of what could have been a man who should have stood as one of the Empire's greatest warriors, now forced to serve the very cause of the enemies he despises most. I am certain he cannot be blind to the truth, that his rebellion is bleeding the Empire dry, the same Empire that remains the last true hope against the Dominion. Yet, his pride has become his prison, his honor the bars on the door, closing off every other path. Attempting to unify Skyrim under his own banner is, in his mind, the least bad option. But it is the only one his broken pride will permit, and whether he wins or loses, I believe that when he is finally forced to grasp the full, terrible irony of his life's work, that knowledge alone will be enough to destroy him from within. In the grand theater of fiction, where villains are often just shadows for heroes to punch, there are those few who burn with a light of their own, a cold, dark, ambition-fueled star. To me, Mannimarco is one such celestial malignancy, a figure born in Altmer in the forgotten mists of the First Era, whose potential was so vast he was whisked away by the Psijic Order itself. It was there, in the heart of magical discipline, that I believe his prodigious talent as a mage twisted into a morbid fascination with the ultimate taboo, necromancy. When I think of Mannimarco, I see him standing shoulder to shoulder with the most captivating villains I've ever encountered. The serpentine genius of Orochimaru, the fractured soul of Voldemort, the brilliant mischief of Loki. What truly makes these figures resonate with me is their sheer, unadulterated talent. They are rivals to the greatest powers in their own universes, capable of feats that would make heroes tremble. They don't stumble into darkness, they stride into it, choosing the forbidden path out of sheer spite, ambition, and the realization that they can. It's this choice that, in my opinion, births the most compelling narratives. To try and capture the essence of Mannimarco in a single breath would be a fool's errand, so allow me to break down his story, to piece together the mosaic of the King of Worms, so that we might better understand the shadow he casts. To truly grasp the magnitude of Mannimarco's fall, I think we first have to understand the heights from which he fell. The Psijic Order, in my estimation, is one of the most formidable magical organizations in Tamriel's history. I mean, when a living god like Sotha Sil was once an honorary member, it's safe for me to say that no other guild has ever concentrated such awesome power in one place. It's been suggested that the power they wield comes not from Magicka as we know it, but from the manipulation of nature itself. This, to me, is a fascinating distinction. It could very well mean they practice magic in a way that echoes the old Elnafe, those divine at Ada who are the very bones of Mundus, nature personified. So, while their methods might seem similar, deriving power from Aetherius, the way they draw upon it feels fundamentally different and more profound to me. Some of the Order's achievements, I find, are just staggering in their scale. The idea that they can move the entire island of Artium at will, or phase it out of existence to avoid invasion, is mind-boggling. I believe their occasional centuries-long disappearance from history is a deliberate choice, their way of stepping back from the world's chaos. Their destruction of King Orgnum's fleet with a controlled storm in the Third Era clearly demonstrates a power to command the weather over a vast area. It was into this world of immense power that the now famous Vanus Galerion, founder of the Mages Guild, arrived with an Altmer soothsayer named Hylian. I find Vanus's backstory incredibly poignant. Born as Trectus, he was the son of a serf, essentially a slave. His father taught both himself and Vanus to read, but when they were discovered by their owner, Lord Gyrnas, the price was horrific. His father was hanged, but Vanus managed to escape, eventually taken in by traveling singers who brought him to Artium, where the Magister Aecasis saw his potential and took him as a pupil. And just like that, he joined the Psijic Order. Here, in this crucible of power, Vanus met Mannimarco, a fellow student. It seems Mannimarco was also identified by the Psijics at a young age. It's never been clear exactly when Mannimarco was born, though it's said he came from royal Altmeri blood, a detail that, for me, adds another layer of mystery to his origins. The two became great friends, mastering the mystic arts together. I'm not entirely sure why, but Vanus Galerion himself calls him a brilliant novice in the book Artium Lost, which tells me his incredible talents must have been obvious from the very beginning. The way Galerion speaks about Mannimarco makes me feel they truly grew up together in the Order, like they were novices side by side. Honestly, it's no surprise to me that they were competing from the start. With a setup like that, we all know it's bound to end in tragedy. At that time, I believe Vanus Galerion and Mannimarco were without a doubt the most brilliant students in all of Artium. But their paths diverged so dramatically. While Galerion, with what was described as a light and warm heart, used his gifts wisely and honorably, Mannimarco turned to the dark arts, his dark and cold heart slowly being corrupted by them. In their own ways, I see both Galerion and Mannimarco as critics of the Psijic Order. Galerion, I think, always wanted to bring magic to the people, to democratize the Order's knowledge. Mannimarco, on the other hand, seems to have taken the Order's isolationism to its logical, albeit selfish, conclusion. Galerion's belief was that if the Psijics were separate from Mundus, they shouldn't be bound by its cares or laws. To me, even the grave and faithful counsel the Psijics offered came from a place of superiority, treating those they advised as lesser men. Mannimarco's perspective, as I interpret it, was simply one of supreme indifference to what others thought or what was considered right.
You're a greater fool than I thought.
You tainted the Thapora Tower. You're worse than a murderer.
Pathetic. Do you expect Ikesis to bind me here? No, he'll simply banish me from the island.
That won't be enough. You're a beast, Mannimarco. A beast that needs to be caged.
Of course you're right. And once I reach the mainland, I'll show the world just how right you are. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a ritual to complete. Now, to my masterwork. If Ikesis does not see the genius of my work, he can rot with the rest of them.
He seemed to view his methods purely as a means to an end, without any moral attachment. But after many years, Galerion made a horrifying discovery. Mannimarco was using mysticism to manipulate souls and the dead. Disgusted by this profane act, Vanus confronted his old friend beneath the Sepura Tower.
I don't get it! What happened to make you like this? Why are you doing it?
He pleaded with Mannimarco to repent, but in my view, it was already too late. His pleas were utterly ignored. Mannimarco and his like-minded students then left Artium, their exile self-imposed. Eventually, after continued disagreements with the Order, though they all hated necromancy, Galerion also left Artium. He was driven by his dream to share the wonders of magic with everyone. Galerion, of course, went on to establish the Mages Guild, an institution that, I believe, spread magical knowledge far wider than the Psijic Order ever did. After his exile, it seems to me that Mannimarco became obsessed, seeking out every lost secret of the necromantic arts he could find. I'm talking about things like how dragon priests controlled their Draugr, ancient Iliad tablets on summoning spirits, and even the legendary Crimson Book of Skulls, a tome that the great Shalador himself was thought to have destroyed, following the plane meld. Galerion, in what I see as a final, epic confrontation, led an army of mages and lamp knights to a cursed mountain to settle things with Mannimarco.
Now, ancient enemies band together. Old ambitions rekindled.
There, Galerion's forces were met by an equally powerful army of necromancers, both sides poised for a climactic battle. As they clashed, the mountain lit up with lightning and frost. The necromancers summoned hordes of undead, only to see them battered by streams of light from the battle midges. It was during this battle that Galerion had a realization. Mannimarco was no longer truly alive. He had transformed himself into a lich, achieving a twisted form of immortality. For a long time, it was believed Mannimarco had died in that fight, and though Galerion himself was tragically killed, Mannimarco clung to his undeath, ensuring the practice of necromancy would endure. Mannimarco's followers were either killed or scattered, and the victory secured the legacy of Galerion and his mages' guild. But in a final, cruel twist that I find truly vile, Mannimarco raised Galerion from the dead to serve for a time as one of his worm thralls. We know Mannimarco was around during the Middle Dawn and was expelled from the Order around that time, which to me suggests he was a member for over 1,000 years. The lore has always been a bit inconsistent, in my opinion, on how long elves live. Morrowind seems to imply that it's very rare for Myr to live past 100, and that Telvanni elders use forbidden necromancy for their longevity. But then in the Tribunal DLC, we learn Berenzia, who isn't a necromancer, is over 400 years old and looks maybe middle-aged at worst. It said Mannimarco experienced the most catastrophic of the dragon breaks, the Middle Dawn, which spanned over 1,000 years in the First Era. For me, it's entirely plausible for a mortal to reach an age of 1,030 years. Just look at Devaithfur from Morrowind. That elf is over 4,000 years old, and he's a Dunmer, not an Altmer. And he did it all through sheer magical mastery, possibly using necromancy to preserve himself, as many Telvanni are rumored to do. If a Dunmer can hit 4,000 without becoming a lich, then I believe an Altmer can naturally reach 1,030 years. Granted, a large chunk of that was the Middle Dawn Dragon Break, but that's still an incredible amount of time to be studying magic. I think this puts him in the same league as Devaithfur and the Tribunal in terms of sheer longevity and power. To really get inside Mannimarco's head and understand his achievements, I feel we have to first understand the dark craft he was so obsessed with. Different cultures have their own ideas about what necromancy is. In its broadest sense, I understand it as any kind of soul manipulation. Technically, we could classify it under the Conjuration school of magic, since both involve summoning spirits and drawing on Oblivion's power. However, I think necromancy is more commonly understood to mean manipulating mortal souls and reanimating their corpses. This is typically done by binding a soul to a physical form that the necromancer has prepared. I've always wondered why we see so many skeletons among the undead, but fewer zombies and almost no revenants. It seems the longer a body is dead, the weaker its original owner's claim on it becomes. A spirit can apparently stay tied to its remains for days, weeks, or even years, which I think probably depends on the person's willpower in life. The shorter that time, the more likely the spiritual connection still exists, a wise, or perhaps even ethical, Necromancer doesn't want to fight for control of their creation, especially not with an angry spirit trying to get back into the world. It seems the best approach is to ensure the soul has departed before the reanimation starts. Because even if the necromancer were to win that spiritual battle, it's what I would call a cruel victory, tormenting a spirit on its way to its final rest. So why is this important? In my view, it's crucial for understanding Mannimarco's motives and his actions. This gives us a hint about what he's aiming for in his attempts to mantle Molag Bal and his role as the Lich King. Another concept I believe we need to explore to truly understand Mannimarco is that of liches. Leeches are undead necromancers who have mastered lichdom, what I consider the most sophisticated form of undeath. Many in the Elder Scrolls universe have tried to become a lich. But ascending to lichdom is an incredibly risky process, and it seems to me that it's unique for each necromancer who attempts it, in terms of the power needed, the power gained, and the time it takes. According to notes from Gulveig the Ascendant, someone who attempted this transformation, it requires extraordinary willpower, deep necromantic knowledge, a powerful magical relic, and a large number of living souls. The necromancer casts a powerful spell on their subjects, using the relic as a focus. The spell is designed to steal souls in an incredibly painful way. And this, I believe, is intentional for the ritual to succeed. The soul must be torn from its body as painfully as possible, though the exact reason for this remains uncertain. Collecting and torturing souls in this manner is said to be a critical part of the ascension. This idea seems to be supported by Mannimarco's own studies on the soul shriven, which I'll get into later. The first element, as I see it, is the sheer will to force your own body past death. Without this ultimate mental power, the transformation can't even begin. Few have the courage for even this first step. I'm sure many falter and are lost when the pain and horror overwhelm their willpower. Essentially, you'd have to will yourself to die while keeping your consciousness intact. And in that tiny moment, before your consciousness fades, you have to perform necromancy on yourself with your own fleeting soul. I mean, that is definitely not something a normal person could ever pull off, and even with the greatest will, you'd still need profound necromantic knowledge. Willpower provides the force, but I believe knowledge is what focuses that will and guides the transformation. Becoming a lich isn't just simple necromancy on yourself. You have to perform a perfect necromancy where the body, its original soul, and consciousness are all perfectly aligned. In my opinion, only the most intelligent and daring necromancers can delve deep enough into forbidden lore to gather the spells needed for lichdom. Another key part of becoming a lich is transferring the soul into a physical object. While Tamrielic folklore acknowledges this, I think it often perpetuates the myth that a lich can be killed by destroying that object. The truth seems to be that the necromancer is only dependent on the object during the transference, the duration of which can vary. Once the transference is complete and the soul has left the body, the ascension is finished, and the physical object becomes irrelevant. Then, the lich is born, a corpse reanimated by the very soul it had in life. If, however, the object is lost or destroyed before the transference is done, the ascension fails, and the necromancer dies instantly. Necromancers have been known to perform a nearly week-long ritual where they create a special hourglass called the Sands of Resolve to hold their soul. It's said that Mannimarco was the first lich to do this, though this is debated. But if we are to believe it, then we have to acknowledge the immense knowledge he possessed and the willpower it took to do something that had never been done before, which was undoubtedly a massive risk. To me, this would make him the creator of lichdom and rightfully the Lich King, at least in a true necromantic sense, because there are dragon priests who have done something similar. Unlike necromancers, these leeches are sustained by transferring life energy after death. Draugr in Nordic tombs transfer their life force to their master's body, perpetuating the priest's life and giving them a powerful undeath akin to lichdom. While Mannimarco was performing these horrific yet brilliant acts of magic, Vanus Galerian formed his Mages Guild in the early Second Era. In its shadow, I believe Mannimarco secretly formed his own counter-organization. the Order of the Black Worm. Members of this cult are often branded with a black pentagram, which to me symbolizes the damnation of their souls. The order grew as Mannimarco recruited mages into cells called worm nests, each led by a worm anchorite who supervised other ranks like adepts, worm warriors, and thralls. New recruits were lured with promises of great power, and all were sworn to secrecy on pain of undeath. The anchorites reportedly communicated directly with Mannimarco, though how they did so isn't clear. If I had to guess, they probably used a form of ethereal telepathy, much like the Psijic Order. Some members, known as worm eremites, chose to become undead themselves and were always guarded by undead minions. As Archmage Galerion tried to destroy these cells, but Mannimarco proved to be incredibly sly in his recruitment. He targeted mages from within the guild, outcast witches, and reachman wizards for his illicit order. In most parts of Tamriel, necromancy was seen as an atrocity, but it seems many officials were susceptible to bribery and turned a blind eye as the order gained stronger footholds. It's telling to me that members of the order reportedly never spoke Mannimarco's name aloud, referring to him only as the King of Worms. This, I think, established his position as the supreme necromancer, someone so far above them that they didn't dare use his name. Galerion blamed the order for the rapid spread of soul gems and soul trapping. Soul trapping had been taught only to the most experienced mages guild members, both because of its potential for abuse and because it was technically a form of necromancy. Nevertheless, it became common knowledge among mages, which I see as part of the Order's plot to make necromancy seem more commonplace. Despite Galerion's efforts to ban soul trapping and ferret out the Order's cells, necromancy became an accepted and legally tolerated magical discipline in some parts of Tamriel, most notably Cyrodiil. During the Alliance War in Second Era 582, the Order assisted Mannimarco in his sinister plots across Tamriel. In doing so, they also aided Molag Bal, which is why I believe they were sometimes called a Daedric cult. When Empress Clivia Tharn fell under Mannimarco's influence, the Order was allowed to operate freely in Cyrodiil. With Mannimarco as the true power behind the throne, the Mages Guild was kicked out of the city, and the Order took its place in the Arcane University and as advisors to the Ruby Throne. From there, it seems their goal was to replace the Guild across the entire continent. Mannimarco's fascination with necromancy is obvious to me, but what were his motives with Molag Bal and the Plainmild? One of his followers, Vasteri, who was also a follower of Azura and Sothasil, allied with him over the shared goal of seeking to trap souls as one might capture Lesser Daedra. Vasteri went to Cold Arbor herself, believing that's where their objective lay. She would be the first to bring black soul gems from Cold Harbor to Tamriel. They were perfect for their ambitions, small, able to contain even the most willful souls, and seemingly indestructible. Vasteri tried to replicate black soul gems, but her aspirations soon clashed with Mannimarco's. To me, it's clear that Mannimarco wanted to use them for power, while Vasteri, as a follower of Azura, wanted to build upon them for ethical reasons. Fearing Mannimarco, Vasteri fled with her husband and continued to improve her creation. She eventually came up with the perfected Sigil Geode, an alternative to black soul gems. She intended to use it to communicate with the souls trapped inside for the knowledge they held. However, when she reported her findings to Vanus Galerion, his righteous nature was disgusted by it. It's said that sometime after her falling out with Vanus, she also achieved lichdom and dedicated herself to Azura, though I find this part questionable. As for why Mannimarco didn't use the Sigil Geode, I can think of a few reasons. It might not have been as powerful as black soul gems, or perhaps the fact that the Sigil Geode was designed to be ethical and not inflict pain went against everything a Lich King like Mannimarco stood for, as his power clearly relied on souls created through intense pain. Although capable of storing black souls, the gems were dangerous, as bits of the caster's own soul could leak into them. It seems Mannimarco did many experiments with soul gems to achieve the effects of a black soul gem without the risk and lengthy process. Now, let me circle back to what I said earlier about becoming a Lich. To become a Lich and increase its power, A necromancer needs to collect many souls, and the more painfully those souls are taken, the more powerful they become. This statement, in my opinion, aligns perfectly with the information Mannimarco gathered on the Soul Shriven. Soul Shriven are the remnants of people whose souls were stolen by a Daedric power and tormented until they break and become feral. The soul gems containing the essences of Soul Shriven are unlike any other. Their power can be used to create powerful enchantments or fuel potent spells. And if a Soul Shriven were to escape, their resentment and anger would cause the soul gem they are trapped in to grow even more powerful. So here's my big theory. I believe Mannimarco was fascinated with Molag Bal and tried to mantle him because of the immense potential Molag Bal's realm offered him as a necromancer. As we've established, necromancy is the manipulation of mortal souls and the reanimation of their bodies. And Molag Bal is literally known as the harvester of souls and the supposed creator of soul gems. The black soul gems needed for necromancy are found in Cold Harbor, Molag Bal's plane of oblivion. But more than that, I think the real reason Mannimarco was fascinated with Molag Bal's realm was because the souls damned there create much more potent black soul gems than any other method. Furthermore, the Soul Shriven are incredibly durable thralls. They could sustain far greater injuries than a living creature and could work long past the point where a living slave would collapse. However, they are not invulnerable. The final death of a Soul Shriven results in its complete annihilation, so total that not even a trace of its essence can escape to Aetherius. And to add to the benefits of Cold Harbor, a soul destroyed in this manner empowers the domain's master even more. To me, this represents the absolute height of power Mannimarco could imagine. A plane of existence with the most enduring thralls, capable of creating the most powerful black soul gems, and where even their destruction benefits the master. Later, after the warp in the west, the Order of the Black Worm pioneered an easier way to create black soul gems using the rituals of the Revenant. We'll talk more about that in a later chapter. Baron Aquilarios, also known as the Prophet and son of the Duke of Calovia, became Emperor of Cyrodiil by overthrowing Leovic, the last of the Longhouse Emperors, after Leovic had decriminalized Daedra worship. During his rule, however, I think the thought of being an illegitimate ruler deeply bothered him. Varen was not a true emperor because he wasn't dragonborn, a fact that clearly made him insecure. Mannimarco, in a brilliant move of manipulation, played on these insecurities. He convinced Varen that a modified coronation ritual could not only light the dragon fires but also persuade Akatosh to make him dragonborn, which would legitimize his rule as an emperor endorsed by the god of time himself. Varen then led the 5 companions on a 2-year quest to find the Amulet of Kings for the ritual. This group consisted of some of the greatest figures of that time: Lyris Titanborn, a Nord warrior with the blood of giants, who served as Varen's bodyguard; Sai Sahan, the Red Guard captain of the Dragon Guard, charged with protecting the group; Abner Tharn, Chancellor of the Elder Council and Varen's advisor, who accompanied them as Imperial battlemage; and of course, Mannimarco himself. In Second Era 579, the 5 gathered at the Temple of the One in the Imperial City and began the ritual. It was only then, in that critical moment, that Varen learned the true extent of Mannimarco's deception. Mannimarco revealed his true allegiance. He was an agent of Molag Bal.
And as enemies rise faster than allies, salvation cannot come from one hero alone, but from many.
The ritual wouldn't reignite the dragon fires. In fact, I find it did the exact opposite. It weakened the ancient barriers protecting Nirn, setting the mortal realm adrift in oblivion, and causing the horrific event known as the Soulburst. This event allowed Molag Bal to begin the plane mold. As the Soulburst happened, magical aftershocks swept across Nirn. It's said that mages worldwide died or went mad. Red Mountain trembled, earthquakes shook Skyrim, and terrible storms devastated the coasts of Elsweyr and Valenwood. The constellation of the Serpent grew so large it seemed to threaten all other star signs at once. Consumed by the Soulburst's fires, Varen Aquilarios vanished. He was declared dead, a fact Mannimarco used to frame Lyris Titanborn and Sai Sahan for the Emperor's murder. Lyris was captured by Mannimarco, while Abner Tharn, in what I see as a desperate bid to preserve the Empire and himself, pledged allegiance to him. Sai Sahan fled with the Amulet of Kings, hiding it in Sancre, which only made the incrimination seem more legitimate.
So, we meet in person at long last. You look taller in your projection, and not a moment too soon. If I had to inspect one more bloody soul gem, I'd have thrown myself from the tower. A fair question. I know things that can help you. Here's a bit to whet your appetite. Mannimarco isn't doing any of this to serve Molag Bal. His ultimate plan is to out-scheme the god of schemes, and to replace him. The Amulet of Kings is the key to everything. Why do you think he kidnapped Sai Sahan? He's torturing him, trying to get him to reveal the Amulet's hiding place. Precisely. With the Amulet at his command, Mannimarco believes he can trap Molag Bal's essence and absorb his power. He seeks to become a god himself.
After Mannimarco's betrayal, Tharn had no choice but to hand over control of the Empire to the King of Worms. To ensure necromancy's dominance, Mannimarco immediately threw the Mages Guild out of the Imperial City and had any remaining dissenters arrested. To avoid execution, Tharn, slimy as ever in my opinion, pledged his loyalty to Mannimarco. In return, he was made steward of the Imperial City.
What? You son of a bitch!
Are you insane? Get away from me, you brutish she-troll!
Yes, stand down.
He's done nothing but lie to us from the beginning. I don't care what he says. He'll always be Mannimarco's toady.
Please. Mannimarco wants me dead. Did I pretend to capitulate to him? Yes, I did. Do you have any idea how many lives I saved by doing so?
The only thing you saved was your holdings in your own hide, you pompous ass!
His daughter Clivia, still the Empress Regent, became a ruler in name only, while Mannimarco was the true power behind the throne. Despite his position, however, Mannimarco had Abner Tharn locked away in Cold Harbor. He also turned Clivia against her father, luring her with promises of teaching her the dark arts to master life and death. In Second Era 582, Varen Aquilarios resurfaced as the prophet after being turned into a soul shriven in Cold Harbor.
Vestige, until now, you've only known me as the prophet, but that is not my true name. I am Varen Aquilarius.
Our fallen emperor, in the tattered robes of a moth priest, blind as a newborn kitten.
I am sorry I deceived you, Vestige.
With the help of the Vestige and Lyris Titanborn, he rescued Abner. In return, Abner told them where Sai Sahan was imprisoned in Cold Harbor. With the 5 companions reformed, they went to Cold Harbor, where Abner performed the same ritual that was used on Varen. This time, however, one of the companions had to sacrifice their life so Akatosh could empower the Vestige to defeat Molag Bal. Because Abner was the only one who knew the ritual, he couldn't be the one sacrificed. Ultimately, a sacrifice was made and the playmold was stopped, though we don't know for sure who it was. I believe it was likely Varen, as he was nearing the end of his mortal life anyway. After Molag Bal's defeat, Abner took the Amulet of Kings and fled to Serodial. His greatest desire was to unite the warring territories under one banner. Although it was suspected Abner would try to use the amulet for this goal, Its power had apparently been spent for at least a generation. Afterwards, the Tharn family, now the rulers of Cyrodiil through Varen's widow, Empress Regent Clivia Tharn, made a secret pact with Mannimarco.
No telling my secrets. Go to your room, Abner. I will deal with you shortly. Ah, dear Lyris. Your old position at the Foundry is still available. We'll even give you your own set of unbreakable chain.
He will not remain discorporated for long. His consciousness will be adrift for a few moments, but that is all. My estates, my titles, my own life, it's all forfeit now. All in the name of preserving the Empire. I swear by all the gods, Mannimarco will pay dearly for this.
It seems the King of Worms agreed to strengthen the Imperial armies by resurrecting their fallen soldiers. Abner, Clivia's father, developed a deep hatred for Mannimarco after the Soul Burst. He was soon taken to the castle of the Worm in Cold Arbor and imprisoned there again. Before the Soul Burst, after the fall of the Longhouse dynasty, Mannimarco had approached Ard Kaddak of Markarth with a proposition. The rich folk were embittered by Varen's rise to power, as Durkarak's conquest of Cyrodiil and the rise of the Longhouse dynasty had been a point of pride for them. Mannimarco pledged justice for Kaddak's people in exchange for giving the Worm cult shelter in Markarth. And eventually, Mannimarco delivered. Because of the Soulburst, Varen lost his throne, his lands, and as far as the Ard was concerned, his life. Following the Soulburst, Mannimarco spent a good amount of time in Markarth. He and his Worm cultists were given access to the ruins of Nuchwanzel by Ard Kaddak, who was grateful for Varen's downfall. Kaddak also gave him a large piece of land in the hills near Markarth for his experiments. There, Mannimarco performed a ritual to meld that land with Cold Harbor, but his attempt failed. The land was torn from Tamriel but didn't go to Cold Arbor either, instead becoming lost in between realms. However, I believe Mannimarco was able to use the knowledge from this failure to later initiate the plane meld with Molag Bal. This sundered land would become the lost realm of Greyhaven. Meanwhile, the 5 companions were reformed with the arrival of the prophesied Solace I, or the Vestige, who freed the companions from Molag Bal's clutches and reclaimed the Amulet of Kings, defeating Mannimarco in the process. The Warp in the West is an event similar to a dragon break that I believe occurred due to the use of the Mantella on the Numidium. A dragon break is when the linear flow of time shatters, allowing multiple realities to happen at once, before merging back into a single timeline. It's compared to the Middle Dawn of the First Era, though its effects were localized to the Iliac Bay region, and it only lasted for a few days compared to the Middle Dawn, which is 1,008 years. The closest real-world equivalent I can think of for dragon breaks is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. This principle basically states that an infinite number of outcomes can occur when an event isn't being observed. It's only when we try to measure something that it takes on a specific form. So, if we were to scale this up, your cat in the next room is both tearing up the couch and bullying the dogs. It's only when you go look that you find it doing one of those things. I think you get the idea. The incident began on the 9th of Frostfall in 3rd Era 417 and lasted through the 11th. To some, the days seem to merge into one, with no explanation for the missing time. For others, events progressed much faster than those 3 days could account for. During the Imperial Simulacrum, the 10-year period when Jagar Tharn was impersonating the Emperor, there were reports of the cult searching for someone who knew how to find Spellbreaker and offering large sums for information on the Staff of Magnus. The Elder Scrolls Arena takes place during this whole period. The Order of the Black Worm became much more prominent in the events leading up to the Warp in the West in 3rd Era 417, where I believe they were involved in various political schemes in the Iliac Bay area. They were based in Skorg Barrow, where Mannimarco plotted to get his hands on the totem of Tiber Septim. Daggerfall had 6 different endings, which put Bethesda in a bit of a bind when developing Morrowind. They needed a canon ending, but didn't want to choose just one. So they decided all the endings would become canon. They did this by introducing a new literary device, a dragon break. In lore terms, a dragon break happens when the fabric of time is broken and time branches off. When this happens, multiple realities occur simultaneously. At the end of the break, all these realities converge again.
The Mentella is hurled from Aetherius, and although drawn to the empty chest of great Numidium, the will of the King of Worms commands us to his side. With his power, the King of Worms leaves his mortal frame and joins the ranks of the gods in Oblivion.
Daggerfall has 6 endings, and this is how I understand them. If the player activates the Mentella themselves with the totem, the Numidium kills the player, goes haywire, and is destroyed by Imperial forces. If the player gives the Mantella to the Underking, he absorbs its power, finally finds rest, and creates a large, magicka-free area around himself. If Gortwerg wins, he uses the Numidium to crush the Imperial forces and the Bay Kings. Then the Underking then arrives to destroy the Numidium for good, losing his own life in the process. Gortwerg then succeeds in creating the Orc Kingdom of Orsinium. If the Blades win, they recreate the Numidium and use it to defeat the Bay Kings and the Orcs, uniting all of Tamriel under the Empire once more. If one of the Bay Kings wins, they use the Numidium to defeat all the other kings before the Underking destroys both it and himself. And, most importantly for us, if Mannimarco gets the Mantella, he uses it to become a god. Following the warp, the Order no longer saw Mannimarco as the King of Worms. To them, he had become the God of Worms. They came to believe that he had ascended to become the Necromancer's Moon, or the Revenant, and that he would save them from the Day of Reckoning. They built altars that, when hit by the light of the Necromancer's Moon, could turn grand soul gems into black ones, capable of trapping the souls of sentient mortals. Arche, in my view, is the ultimate arch-nemesis of Mannimarco and all necromancers. Arche's blessing prevents the souls of men, beastmen, and elves from being used without their consent. Arche's law stops those buried with the proper rituals from being raised to serve necromancers. As Mannimarco himself might say, Arche's blessing can be bent by the daring, but Arche's law is absolute. The necromancer's moon eclipses the planet Arche every 8 days, blocking its light from reaching Nirn for 24 hours and thus negating Arche's control over the dead. This celestial event is known as the Shade of the Revenant and casts a purple light on certain places across Tamriel. The purpose of this eclipse, as I see it, is to subvert Arche's divine laws, allowing Mannimarco to be the sole god of life and death. The cult of the Black Worm worships Mannimarco as the god of worms and builds altars in these locations to harness the shade of the Revenant to create black soul gems. Why Mannimarco became a moon instead of a planet like the Aedra, or why he didn't just ascend to oblivion, is a bit of a mystery. But let me offer my theory. I think the Tribunal and Dagoth didn't get their own moons or planes because they weren't proper gods. They were just siphoning divine energy from the heart of a real god. Plus, I don't believe having a celestial form is a requirement for godhood. I think Mannimarco got a moon because he became more like an Aedra than a Daedra, ruling over the unnatural laws of necromancy in direct opposition to Arche, the god of the natural cycle of life and death. During the warp in the west, a series of paradoxical events occurred throughout the Iliac Bay. Many factions tried to get the totem of Tiber Septim, resulting in a time distortion where they all simultaneously succeeded to some degree. This, I believe, explains all the different endings of Daggerfall. As I mentioned earlier, one of the most significant outcomes of this event was Mannimarco's successful apotheosis, which resulted in the creation of the Necromancer's Moon. The Numidium seems to have vanished from Tamriel during the Miracle of Peace, the time after the warp, and the Underking hasn't been seen since either. I've heard rumors that they were both annihilated when the Underking reclaimed his heart, the Mantella that controls the Numidium, and that an anti-magic area was created as a result, though its exact location is unknown. The mysterious agent who found the totem is also said to have disappeared in the chaos. Mannimarco is said to have experienced the infamous dragon break of the Middle Dawn, During this time, he apparently learned something he calls his mystery from the Maracati Selectives. There's a passage by Mannimarco in the book. Where were you when the dragon broke? The 3 thieves of Morrowind could tell you where they were. So could the High King of Alinor, who was the one who broke it in the first place. As for myself, I was here and there and here again, like the rest of the mortals during the dragon break. How do you think I learned my mystery? The Maracati Selectives showed us all the glories of the dawn so that we might learn, simply, as above, so below. If Mannimarco learned his mystery from the Selectives as he claims, then it seems to me he has been plotting to become a god for a very, very long time. The Selectives had been gone for over 1,000 years by the time of the plane melt. So Mannimarco must have been sitting on that knowledge for quite a while. Some scholars believe that when Mannimarco achieved godhood, he split in 2, with his mortal counterpart cast back down to Nirn and his metaphysical self remaining as the necromancer's moon. The key lesson Mannimarco learned from the Selectives, I think, was the core tenet of Hermetic magic, the sympathetic principle of as above, so below, which informs everything from astrology to voodoo dolls. It's the act of changing things in the heavens to affect things everywhere else.
I see Bolor was unsuccessful in delaying you. Very well. I shall reanimate him once we are done here. Perhaps we shall chat for a while, since you really have no other options. I must say, I expected Archmage Traven, rather than his star pupil. I am disappointed to see that he could not face me himself. I have met so many of his predecessors over the years. I developed a particular fondness for Galerion, ill-preserved though he may be. But here you are instead, skilled enough to make it this far, which speaks volumes about you. Perhaps you'll be as useful to me as Traven would. Oh, my dear, I didn't mean to imply that you have a choice. I will make you another in a long tradition of worm thralls, and take my time in studying you. Your very soul will be forfeit to me. Power, my dear friend. I seek power, and so I acquire and study those who have some degree of it. We are after the same things, your guild and I. Yet you worry about good and evil, and do not accept they are manifestations of the same thing. So you brand me a villain, and make vain attempts to destroy me. I watch, and I wait, and I collect you when you come for me. Instead of drawing Traven out, I have received you instead. Perhaps I shall personally go and collect him when we are done here.
During the Oblivion Crisis, Mannimarco decided to destroy the Mages Guild, where he appears as a normal mortal. The leader of the Mages Guild, Archmage Hannibal Traven, sacrificed himself, putting his own soul into a great soul gem. Traven created a trap that would weaken Mannimarco for a limited time if he tried to use the soul gem. The trap worked. Mannimarco was greatly weakened and was eventually killed by an agent of the Mages Guild. But it's my belief that this person could have just been a pretender and not the real Mannimarco, or at least just an aspect or avatar of him. And so the curtain falls not on a man, but on a monument to ambition. Mannimarco's story, A Journey from Psijic Prodigy to a Literal God Orbiting the World, is a testament to what a singular, brilliant will can achieve when untethered from morality. He may be one of the vilest souls to have ever walked Mundus. But I have to admit, his brilliance is a thing of terrible beauty. The debate still rages, of course, on whether he truly achieved divinity in the chaos of the Dragon Break. it's also heavily contested whether the Mannimarco seen during the Oblivion Crisis was the same one who rose to power during the Plane Meld. But what I know for certain is that Mannimarco's power was a true blight upon Tamriel. The fact that his existence led to the deaths of thousands throughout history is, for me, a testament to both his immense power and his profound evil. So, as we stand at the end, I have to ask, is Mannimarco's ambition finally sated? Has he achieved everything he ever wanted, or is there more to his grand design than we could ever know? Because for those who hunger for power, I believe there is always more to acquire, always more control to be had. And that is it for the video. Please like and subscribe. If you like this content, this helps me out a lot. And for those who do not know, this is my second channel I started specifically to post Elder Scrolls contents. On my main channel, you can find a lot of Elden Ring lore contents. In any case, I find it so cozy and at home while talking about Elder Scrolls. Thank you so much if you made it to the end. May Talos guide you on your quest.
And once again, thank you for being here. Be kind to yourself, and I'll see you on the next one.
You